Good afternoon and welcome to Committee of the Whole for East Gwillimbury Council. Today is Tuesday, November 21st. My name is Scott Crone and I am the acting mayor in place of Virginia Haxon, who is absent with notice. Please, Madam Clerk, note that. I'd like to call this meeting to order and ask if there are any declarations of interest. Seeing none, I will move on to the land acknowledgement. The town of East Gwillimbury recognizes and acknowledges the lands originally used and occupied by the First Peoples of the Williams Treaties First Nations and other Indigenous peoples, and on behalf of Council, I thank them for sharing this land. We also acknowledge the Chippewas of Georgina Island First Nation as EG's closest First Nation community and recognize the unique relationship the Chippewas have with the lands and waters of this territory. They are the water protectors and environmental stewards of these lands, and we join them in these responsibilities. I would encourage all of us here in this room today to consider that land acknowledgement when we're dealing with the subject matter before us today. I think there's a lot of connection there. Move on to Section D, Community Announcement. I'd first like to mention that the Santa Claus Parade and tree lighting that we had on Sunday was a tremendous success, and thank you to the committee and volunteers who made it happen. These things just don't happen on their own, so I know a lot of hard work went into it, and thank Councillor Johns, who was our council liaison on that as well. On December 2nd, Santa is coming back to EG. He's going to be in the Mount Albert Lions Santa Claus Parade, and so we'll meet him there. And on Sunday, December 3rd, there will be an old-fashioned Christmas market at the Sharon Temple. So if you haven't bought your Christmas gifts, that's a good place to get it. I'll pass it over to anyone else on council who would like to make a community announcement. Councillor Carruthers.
Thank you. Yesterday marked Trans Day of Remembrance, an important day to honor trans and gender nonconforming people who've lost their lives as a result of violence and discrimination directed towards trans communities. It's important that we continue to reaffirm that 2S LGBTQI+ rights are human rights. Section 15 of the Canadian Charter protects the equality of rights of all people in Canada. Let's continue to work together to address discrimination, break down barriers, and create a more inclusive EG community. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Leahy, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Through you, Acting Mayor Crone. I would like to share the great news from Bev Hall, who organized the Hollyberry Show in Holland Landing a couple of weeks ago, the donation from which this year brings the total donation to the Holland Landing Lions Club to date to $14,000. And Bev would like to thank all the residents who shopped at the show and the 60+ vendors and volunteers who made the show another huge success for our community. And she'd like everyone to save the date of November 2nd for 2024. Secondly, I have the EG Fire and Emergency Services announcement, which is hosting Dare to Care, Be a Holiday Hero at Mount Albert Foodland, Vince's in Sharon, and the EG Superstore at Yonge and Green Lane. They are inviting people to drop by to support the cause, to donate food, which will be going to the Mount Albert and Holland Landing food banks, monetary donations, as well as toys, which the town is organizing for their annual toy drive. So be a holiday hero, and we look forward to seeing you on Wednesday, November 29th from 10 a.m. till 1 p.m. A menorah lighting will be taking place at the EG Sports Complex on Thursday, December the 7th at 5 p.m. Please come out and join us in that, marking that with the celebration of light. And lastly, North Union Christmas Sing-Song will be taking place at the North Union Community Centre on Bogue Road, 7 p.m. on Friday, December the 8th. We look forward to seeing you there. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else with community announcements? Okay. And so just before we move on to our agenda, I'd just like to mention to everyone here, especially my colleagues on council, we have an incredibly full agenda. And so I would encourage everyone, and I know you like to ask good questions, and it's good that you have good questions, and we're being thoughtful. Let's try and be as efficient with our time as we can, and try and make the day move as quickly as possible, and I appreciate your support on that. We'll move to Section E, Deputations. Go ahead, Madam Clerk.
Through you, Mr. Chair, prior to proceeding with the deputation, I did want to advise the committee that we have just received a deputation request from an applicant for item I-2, which is Development Services Report DS 2023-43, zoning bylaw amendment and OPA application for South Sharon Development. The individuals requested if a committee would consider waiving the procedure to permit them the opportunity to be added as a deputant. At this time, that would be up to the committee's discretion. Should they wish to proceed with allowing for the deputation to take place, you would need a motion to waive the procedure to allow. Alternatively, the committee's recommendations will be ratified at a future meeting, so staff can certainly work on facilitating a deputation at a future meeting as well.
Madam Clerk, did we have any other people looking for deputations as well?
Through you, Mr. Chair, there were other individuals that reached out today that was outside of the scope of the deadline, and we've been encouraging them to come to a future meeting.
Okay. All right. So it's before council if we want to waive our procedure and allow this deputant to speak. What's your pleasure? I have someone like to make a motion to that effect? Councillor Ray Clemente.
Happy to make a motion. I just wanted clarification about the item that they wanted to speak to. I-2, I believe, is a master plan. Is it H2?
Bear with me. It's the Development Services Report DS 2023-47. And
So that would be H2.
I2. Sorry, on the... I'm just looking at our public agenda, and the deputant's request is noted as item I2.
Must have moved things around then. Thank you.
Okay, so we have Councillor Carruthers, you moved to waive the procedural bylaw. Any, okay, all in favor? Any opposed? Okay, motion is carried. Madam Clerk, please note for the record that we're going to allow the deputant to appear. So first, go ahead, Councillor Carruthers.
Just a question about the agenda. We have Northland Power talking about the storage project. It's a big project for EG, and it's under deputations, not presentations, which means they're limited to 5 minutes. And I'm just wondering if that's something that we want to allow more time for, given that it's a big project coming to EG.
Do we have a representative here from Northland Power? Or are they online? Sir?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
They're virtual, Mr.
online.
Chair.
5 minutes or more.
Go ahead. Can you make your presentation in 5 minutes, or would you rather be moved into the presentation section of our agenda?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. We can make it to 5 minutes today and can have a follow-up if required.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay. Well, then let's proceed then. I'd like to recognize P. Godfrey on behalf of Northland Power, making a deputation to committee regarding the Northland Power Woodbine Battery Energy Storage Project. Over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, council members. My name is Patrick Godfrey. I'm a project development manager at Northland Power, and I'm here today to present the Woodbine Energy Storage Project to you. It is a 100 megawatt battery energy storage system project. I'll refer to that as BET forward. And we are bidding this project into the Independent Electricity System Operators, ISO, LT1 procurement December 12th. If you'll please move on to the next slide. So quick introduction, quick case study overview on our one project under construction at the moment to visualize what this type of project will look like. I'll quickly highlight as well what the ISO LT1 procurement is all about. Then I will go into the Woodbine project overview itself and next steps. Next slide, please. So a little bit about Northland Power. We're a global independent power producer. We have almost 40 years of experience in Ontario, Canada, North America, and worldwide in developing projects, building, owning, and operator. We have about 16 gigawatts of projects under development with over 3 gigawatts of operating capacity. We have a large experienced team of developers based in Toronto and around the province as well to support with the projects during development, but also construction and operations. We have a strong environmental and health and safety track record on our projects. We are the majority owners, as I mentioned, on one of the only projects at the moment under construction in the province at this scale, the Oneida Energy Storage Project. We have 4 onshore wind farms in Canada, 13 ground mount solar sites, 4 rooftop solar sites, and 4 natural gas facilities in Canada. All in all, we're an experienced IPP, and we're focused on building strong relationships with local communities and Indigenous people. These are values that are rooted deep in our policies and procedures. Next slide, please. So very quickly, this is the Oneida Energy Storage Project. It is a 250 megawatt energy storage project, and this is a graphic rendering of what this system will look like once in operation. The project that we're bringing to your attention today is a 100 megawatt project, so it is less than half of this size, but it will essentially look very similar with the battery enclosures that you see that look like the containers, as well as a substation in the middle that will connect to Hydro One's 230 kV line that crosses the project property site. Through this project, we have learned a lot in dealing with local community, First Nations groups who are partners in the project, and the county as well, on bringing everything together to ensure this project is a success. Further to that, and I know it is of importance to council and staff, are questions around safety and fire safety. So we do work closely with the fire department here in developing plans, going through training, and working closely with the supplier of the battery packs, who provide the overall plans and procedures for preventing fires, but also for responding to such fires if they do occur. And the battery supplier for this particular project is Tesla, and these are mega packs that you would see. And as I said, you will likely see very similar type of a design and visual representation from a project of this nature, but just smaller. Next slide, please. These are just photos of the project as it is currently under construction. At this stage of construction, you will have seen that site clearing has occurred, grading has occurred, and the pouring of foundations is underway. And in April of next year, we will start receiving Tesla Megapacks on site. Next slide, please. As I mentioned in the agenda, I wanted to touch quickly on what the ISO LT1 or long-term 1 procurement looks like. The ISO is targeting 1,600 megawatts of storage in Ontario. This 100 megawatt project would represent a portion of that if successful. We are in the process of preparing our bid submission for December 12th, and I recognize that we are presenting today. However, we would seek your guidance on how we may obtain evidence for municipal support for a project of this nature at your next council meeting, December 5th. Next slide, please. I will scan over what is BESS, as I mentioned it a little bit on the previous slide, and focus on the benefits to the town of East Gwillimbury. This project does align with the strategic plan of 2022 to 26 in building a vibrant local economy by bringing local employment opportunities, helping businesses thrive through potential contracts for services and supplies, and creating new investment sources through property taxes. This is a new project in the area that is benefiting from renewable generation that's on the grid, but also for future projects as well. And it will enable the town of East Gwillimbury to connect new customers in the future to support with your long-term growth plans. Next slide, please. This is the overlay of the project. The overall project property is 200 acres, and the project footprint here that is shown in the red dashed lines is about 5 to 10 acres. And this is where the battery enclosures will be situated. And we will be connecting to the 230 kV Hydro One transmission line at the southeast corner of this property. And as I mentioned, all infrastructure remains on this property, avoiding the need for any right-of-ways for distribution or transmission for a project of this nature. We've identified all constraints for the project at this stage and continue with our design and engineering, including noise modeling, consultation with the Conservation Authority, York Region, yourselves and staff, and anticipating that a project of this nature, once it receives a contract award, Q2 of next year would have the opportunity to be online within a 2 to 3 year period from there. Next slide, please. So just on the safety FAQs, I referred a little bit to the fire safety earlier. I would welcome a follow-up meeting with staff and council to talk about any further details around fire safety or emergency response plans for these projects, as there can be quite a bit of detail around question and answer there. But we are leveraging our experience from the Oneida Energy Storage Project that I mentioned earlier, and building on the plans that we put in place with the local fire department there and how this is evolving in Ontario. Earlier, I mentioned that we are submitting a bid December 12th for the project to the ISO, and that we would be looking to come back to you, Mr. Chair and Council, to request a municipal support resolution to provide evidence of municipal support for the project. That is it for the presentation. Thank you very much for your time, Mr. Chair and council members, and happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Godfrey. And can I have a mover for this presentation, please, to receive it? Councillor Leahy. Any questions for our presenter? Councillor Roy DiClemente.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you to Mr. Godfrey. Thank you for the presentation, and I think you've addressed most of my questions. I did want to inquire about your noise modeling. I think before I might be in a position to support a resolution of support, I'd like to have an understanding of what kind of, obviously there wouldn't be any light pollution, but what kind of noise pollution might be coming from your site.
Thank you for your question. Through you, Mr. Chair. We look at various suppliers and we create preliminary designs based on those suppliers. And we engage noise engineers, consulting firms to conduct studies to identify the potential noise emissions from a project such as this. And ideally, we're looking to ensure that there are setbacks from potential noise receptors to ensure that at those noise receptors, being homes where people will live, we are complying with the provincial noise thresholds and not surpassing those. If we were to find ourselves in a position where we may, there are mitigation measures that could be taken. But at this point in time, this project is set back far enough from noise receptors.
Thank you. I'm concerned obviously about residential homes, but this is also an agricultural area. There may be livestock that could be potentially impacted by this as well. So I'm just wondering what those provincial thresholds are and how far below them you are, or has this work been done already?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the provincial thresholds we must comply with for this project are 40 decibels. And at this point in time, we do comply with those based on our noise modeling. Should the project design change or we identify new constraints, we'll have to consider further studies and mitigants potentially.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Councillor Johns?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, and thanks, Councillor Roy DiClemente, for asking that question. I was actually thinking that 40 decibels is low. I live right next to the 404, and I don't know the province followed their regulation to meet 40 decibels because it's pretty loud, that highway. So I think that this is great for identifying East Gwillimbury as a place to move the business opportunity, and I think that there are stages for us to work through with yourselves, and I'm happy to walk alongside you as you are exploring taking this to the finish line. I just think bringing more business opportunity and a more diversified tax base is something that we need here in East Gwillimbury, so thank you.
Okay, Councillor Carruthers, you have a question.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, I just wanted for the people who are watching at home not to think that we don't all have questions. There was a wonderful public information center that many of us went to and had a lot of our questions answered there. I love that this is looking at our strategic plan with our commitment to help mitigate climate change, and this will go a long ways toward that. My questions for them at the Public Information Center were about the carbon footprint in creating this, as well as the end-of-life recycling, and I wanted just to comment that I appreciated the answers that we received, and this does look like a very good project for us to be pursuing. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Leahy.
Thank you very much. Through you, Acting Mayor Crone. And I have a question for Mr. Godfrey regarding your previous track record in building this type of facility. Do you have any data or experience that you can share with us from previous battery storage projects?
Through you, Mr. Chair, thank you for the question. We do. We have the experience from the Oneida project that we're currently building right now. We have a large team with experience developing and building BESS projects in other jurisdictions. Northland Power has vast experience dealing with new technologies and being successful at delivering those, as well as owning and operating as well. We'd be happy to provide additional material if you would like.
Okay. Any other questions? I just have one, and I think for the benefit of the folks that didn't make it to your public information session or had a chance to read through your report, can you tell us what's the problem that you're solving for by putting this in East Gwillimbury? What will this help achieve?
Thank you, and through yourself, Mr. Chair. The ISO identified through the first round of procurement that this was a target region for developing battery energy storage projects to provide the grid reliability and dependability services to enable future generation projects and also to support with the addition of new customers. There is a shortfall in the province later this decade with supply, and the ISO with the Ministry of Energy is working diligently to procure projects to help mitigate that shortfall. This project hits the marks for the region as well as what the province is targeting.
So ostensibly, this should give us greater stability to our local grid.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, well, that's good news. Okay, thank you very much for your deputation. This has been moved by Councillor Leahy. I'd like to call a vote. All those in favor? Thank you very much. We know you want, oh, sorry, go ahead, Councillor.
I think you were going to address it, actually, which was the next step, which is what the municipal support resolution might look like.
You read my mind.
I'll let you take care of it.
When do you need that? Go ahead, Ms. Bejean.
Through you, Mr. Chair, there will be a report coming forward to the December 5th meeting of Council that contains the language that they're proposing for the resolution, as well as a request for same-day ratification to meet the timelines for submission.
Perfect. All right, thank you very much. Okay, we'll move on to our next, thank you, Mr. Godfrey. We'll move on to our next deputant, Dee Drake, on behalf of Woodduck Island Homes Corporation and Metrus, making a deputation regarding ICI employment development at Highway 404 and Green Lane. Welcome to our chamber. Over to you.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to committee members. Appreciate the opportunity to have this deputation today. As you can see on the screen, we do have a brief slide presentation that we will be referring to. As has been stated, my name is David Drake. I'm VP of Planning and Development with Metrus Properties, the landowner of this site. We know the application is Woodduck, but that it is Metrus Properties. I have with me a colleague, Steve Balan, VP of Construction, as well as Tony Baldessera from Baldessera Architects. My colleagues are here in the event that there are any questions at the end of the presentation, so to keep that in mind. The purpose of today's deputation to committee is an informational update on the status of this proposal for these two ICI buildings. And what I'd like to do is perhaps go to the next slide to outline a little bit more. So these buildings are within the existing Queensville subdivision. So this is a subdivision that has been dormant for a number of years, but the last activity would have been, I believe, the Acushnet building, which is on the west side of Harry Walker, west side of Harry Walker, north of Ringwell. It's labeled on the drawing, and the lands that are the subject of today's proposal are outlined in red. So the total holding in red is 38 acres, as you can see. But what we're dealing with is just the easterly portion of those lands, which is supporting 2 ICI buildings. And I should mention that the subdivision that this is part of, it is there is a current existing subdivision agreement that is in place, and so the proposal that we are here today on will go through the municipal process for site plan approval and building permits and all of that, but it is something that is in compliance with the subdivision agreement, which is currently in effect. But because of the dormant nature of anything occurring on these lands, ourselves and staff thought it was appropriate to advise committee of this proposal, and we feel that it is a good news story for the town and for all parties concerned. So we wanted to highlight that for your information. And I should mention as well that we have been in contact with staff to work in a collaborative fashion to help fast track the proposal, because the proposal comes attached with it a very ambitious timeline, which is dictated by the deal that has been entered into with one of the tenancies. So with that, I'll just kind of outline high level some of the elements of this proposal. So the southern limit of the red polygon, that is actually the jurisdictional boundary between EG and Newmarket, as I'm sure you're aware. So that line continues east-west. And so obviously our lands are located within EG, but you can see, perhaps maybe the next slide would be helpful. So you can see from this blow up of the 2 proposed buildings that we are pulling the access off of Ringwell, which is a Newmarket jurisdiction road. So the Ringwell cul-de-sac does provide access to the property as well as the provision of municipal services. So it's a bit of a unique situation where that is occurring for the site, but the land's obviously located within East Gwillimbury. And from this, we can see that there are 2 buildings proposed. The northerly building, which is approximately 204,000 square feet, that will be the home to Scholastics Canada. So that is and I'm able to say that it's not like it's a non-disclosure issue. So it is Scholastics that would be the northern tenancy for the proposed use. And the good news here, actually it's good news for EG, but it's maybe not such good news for Markham in the sense that Scholastics currently is located within Markham, but and Metrus is the landlord for the Markham location. Our executive team has been working with Scholastics, and it has been agreed that Scholastics would like to relocate right next to the 404, just south of Green Lane. They see the merits of this location. They see the merits of EG. They see the merits of partnering again with Metrus as a landlord. So that is the deal that we have inked. The clock is ticking on it, and we want to be able to provide a home to that tenancy in accordance with the deal. So that is the northerly parcel, and then to the south of it, because of the confidence that Metrus has within EG and the location aspects, the southerly building, which is about 238,000 square feet, so it's slightly larger, that is a spec building. So it's a building where Metrus is wanting to move forward with the construction program. There are no tenants right now, knock on wood, for that, but we're very optimistic that our leasing team will be able to find tenancies for the southerly building, and it's being designed in such a way so that it could support either one tenant or perhaps be divided into 2 tenancies. So we're trying to adapt to the market conditions with this proposal. But again, it would be a spec building fronting onto the 404. So that's the high level of the proposal. Perhaps I could request for the next slide. And then this is, I mean, it's the early days. We're still working towards our site plan, but this is the elevation treatment that the architect who we have with us today has designed for the building to date. And again, this is a treatment that'll have to make its way through the SPA process, but we're quite proud of the elevation treatment that is proposed to date for the building. Perhaps I could request for the next slide. So apologize for the font being a little bit too small. I'm going to be squinting as well. But so we just wanted to outline the proposal again. So you've got the two buildings. So it's about 450,000 rounding of incremental GFA within the EG community. So again, as I heard earlier, you know, it's a move towards diversifying the tax base. It's a good news story for the community from that standpoint. And again, one of the buildings is a tenancy, which again, we're taking that from another neighboring municipality. The other building, of course, is speculative. And we've already touched on that the nuts and bolts of the proposal in terms of the servicing and the road access do come from Newmarket. In terms of the timeline, so again, the timeline is something that is dictated by the deal that's been inked with Scholastics. So in that vein, there is a tight timeline. The PAC meeting has already occurred with staff. That was on October the 12th. And then the submission for the SPA, the team is working fast and furious to pull that together. So the target date for that would be first week of December. And so then the other milestone date, of course, would be the building permit, so that the construction can commence on both buildings. That would be the proposal. We focus on the tenancy building, but both buildings would be constructed at the same time, pretty much. And we're looking for a permit by April 1st. And again, we do recognize that is an ambitious timeline, but we're hoping that in the spirit of cooperation and working collaboratively with staff and yourselves, that we'll be able to achieve that ambitious target. The other element, other than the building permit issuance, so in terms of construction right now, we're looking for topsoil stripping and earthworks to occur pretty much within the month of November. So that will allow for a bit of a jump start on that program. The other...
I'm sorry to interrupt. I have given you well over the 5 minutes, so
Oh, I'm sorry.
if you could
I'll wrap up.
tidily wrap it up, that would be appreciated.
No problem. So again, like the benefits are listed here: the tenancy, the diversification of tax base, spec building, and it's a continuation of the build out of the existing subdivision, the Queensville subdivision. So we're working towards finishing what we started. So that's the last point was that there is an application for exemption from noise bylaw, and that's been filed with staff, and that is something that is in the works as well. So with that, apologize for running over the clock, but if there's any questions, we're happy to answer.
Thank you very much. Could I have a mover to receive this presentation? Councillor Foster. Okay. Are there any questions? Councillor Ray-DiClemente.
Thank you. Through you to Mr. Drake, thank you very much for taking the time to come here to us today. This is exciting, and I'm really looking forward to seeing this come to fruition. I did want to let you know that Queensville is actually almost 6 kilometers to the north. This isn't part of Queensville, it's actually part of Sharon, but I just thought I would help you position this a little bit differently. I'm curious about how you foresee the site plan working with your tenanted building sort of in front of your larger building. There doesn't seem to be a road access. Are you looking to also create an access through the lands off of Harry Walker, or how do you foresee that to be playing out?
Please go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the question of the councillor. So, yeah, I don't know if we can have the slide back up that shows the property, but I can speak to it at any rate. You're quite correct. The anticipation of development of the lands is just, yep, then, yeah, I guess the next slide. This is good, or the next slide is good, is even better. But so everything is contained on these lands. So there's no proposal for a road connection at this point in time out to Harry Walker. What we are proposing is that we pull the access off of Ringwell, and then once the access has been achieved, you can see that there's like ring road treatments that are around each building. And so what we're proposing to do is put in place a reciprocal easement and operating agreement between both parcels, so that the access for the northerly building, the Scholastics building, it'll be guaranteed access through that access agreement mechanism, so that it won't be guaranteed access out to Ringwell. That is something that is it's embedded in the lease deal to protect Scholastics, and that I mean, you've hit the nail on the head. That's one of the elements that we'll be looking to tidy up at the tail end of the process once we've cleared SPA.
Thank you. I think that might be helpful to Scholastic to understand how they're going to be accessing their site as well. Do you have a sense of how many jobs Scholastic will be bringing to our community?
Through Mr. Chair, to the councillor's question, you know what? You caught me with my pants down on that one. I apologize. I do not have that number, and you know what? In hindsight, I should have. So we can source out from Scholastics, our tenant, to find out just how many jobs that we would expect, but and we can provide that to staff.
It's quite a large facility that they have adjacent to the 404, for a little further south. So, you know, I would expect that it would be quite a fair number, and so we would look forward to welcoming Scholastic and Clifford, should they decide to bring him as well. Thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Johns.
Yeah, I just wanted to say through you, Mr. Chair, that thank you for investing in EG. We've been championing the opportunity of for businesses within town for a while, and I know that I've picked it up since I've gotten elected last November. I really think this is what we are needing right now within our municipality. The fact is fastest growing municipality with residents, we need commercial, we need industrial, we need services, and so thank you, and I'm a big fan of your expedited time map to get there. So we need it, you need it. Seems like we're aligned, so it's great news. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, hearing none, I will call the vote. All those in favor of receipt? Motion is carried. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
All right, and we're moving on to item number 3 now. Al Barkey, on behalf of Acorn Development Corporation, making a deputation about the Development Services Report on the Servicing Allocation Policy. Welcome. Welcome to our chamber. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Lynn Barkey. I'm Vice President of Acorn Development Corporation. I just want to say that I want to pass on my best regards to Mayor Haxon, hoping for a very speedy recovery to office. And if any of you are in contact with her, please send along best regards from everyone at Acorn. Thank you. As Mr. Chairman mentioned, I'm here to talk about the updated Servicing Allocation Policy, and it's item I-1 on the agenda today. And we have read the report, and we are in favor of recommendation number 1.2 in the staff report. That being that a good portion of allocation is directed to completing communities. And so I just want to back up a little bit, just referring to the slide on the screen there. In July of 2022, at the request or at the invitation of staff under the servicing tracking allocation needs process, Acorn, we submitted a request for allocation for a total of 80 units, and 50 on the west side of Morel, shown there on the left, and 30 additional units on further east. And basically, the rationale for that was to complete the community which we have built within the middle of those two yellow areas. Our draft plan goes all the way out to Leslie Street, so you could see a little red box there, which I will speak to in a moment. So the benefits to the town and to the area residents would be, maybe if I could have slide 2. On the west side of Morel, we would convey a 2.8 acre park, which is shown there, 1.13 hectare park at the upper left. And then we have already constructed about half of the Walter Tunney linear park on the east side of the draft plan. And with additional allocation, we can complete the construction of that park, which is just under an acre. And that would provide a link all the way over to the Sharon Creek Drive. So we are asking you to consider the option that does allow for completing communities. And the other part of our draft plan, if you can go to the next slide, please. Committee members should be familiar with this. We've been in front of you twice this year to talk about a potential site plan for 65 stacked townhouse units shown here, as well as we requested rezoning for a portion of the property. So this can fall under completing the community. It also does provide diverse, more attainable housing stock given the nature. So I just wanted to mention that that Acorn is a participating member in the White Belt Landowners Group. Recently, a large tract of land that was brought into the urban boundary. And we're committed to working with other owners, with the town, with the region, hopefully with the province of Ontario, who have said that they'll provide funding for the project in order to bring the YDSS northern system online as quickly as we can. So I just wanted to say we're here for the long haul, and that is the end of my presentation. So if there are any questions, I'll try to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Could I have a mover for receipt of this? Councillor Johns, are there any questions? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Motion carried. Thank you very much for your time. Okay, we are on to our next item, number 4. We have Nick Pileggi making a deputation regard to the Development Services Report, Bylaw Amendment, Official Plan Amendment, South Sharon Developments. Welcome, Mr. Pileggi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to council members for allowing me to speak today. I appreciate it. I was wondering if the clerk could put up the concept site plan from the report, item I2.
Through Mr. Chair, just bear with us for a moment as our deputy clerk is going to do that.
Thank you. That's great. Thank you very much. So my name is Nick Pileggi, and I'm a principal with Macaulay Shiomi Housen, and I'm here on behalf of South Sharon Developments, Inc., also known as Menkes Developments in this case. In 2020, we filed this application for an official plan amendment and a zoning bylaw amendment for a commercial and mixed-use development that includes a number of retail and commercial buildings on this site. Two of the three buildings along the west side, which is Morel Boulevard, are both retail and office buildings, and they're multi-story. And the proposal for the larger building on the top right of the screen, which is a grocery store of approximately 50,000 square feet. Just so the council members are aware, the rezoning is required from rural, but the property uses are consistent with the official plan and the Green Lane secondary plan, which designate the site for both mixed use and commercial uses. The only reason we're in for an official plan amendment is there is a limit in the Green Lane secondary plan on a floor plate for a grocery store of 2,500 square meters. And we're looking for the 50,000 square feet, or about 4,700 square meters. The reason that is, Menkes has been marketing the site for a number of years since the Green Lane secondary plan was approved in and around 2018. And in order to get an anchor tenant and a grocery store to this site, the 50,000 square feet is pretty much the size of a building that is going to be required. The smaller floor plate type grocery stores are like your Vince's or other, specialty markets. Those are typically not found on a site like this, and we think that this more of a regional and local pull here on this site. So the site size, as you can tell, can easily accommodate a building of this size. And I should note that the floor plate of 2,500 square meters is only restricted for a grocery store. So the reality is the building that you see on the site, if it wasn't a grocery store, we could do larger than 2,500 square meters. So overall, the intent of the proposal is to bring needed retail and office jobs to the town of East Gwillimbury, obviously in closer proximity to both the community of Sharon, and we think this will also draw from Holland Landing and Queensville, which are not particularly well served by retail uses right now. It will certainly assist in meeting the 15-minute community, reducing vehicle trips to Green Lane and Yonge, and elsewhere in Newmarket, where folks are now driving to get to those retail opportunities or the larger grocery stores. So overall, just again, want to thank council for allowing me to speak today. We're here in support of the staff recommendation, and we're asking for council support as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pileggi. Can I have a mover for this presentation, please? Moved by Councillor Roy D. Clemente. Do we have any questions? Seeing none at this time, I will call for the vote. All those in favor? All right, motion is carried. Thank you very much. All right, moving to item F, presentations. We have none at this time, and that takes us to item G, which is community infrastructure and environmental services, with Councillor Leahy in the chair. Over to you, Councillor.
Thank you very much, Acting Mayor Crone, also known as Engineering and Public Works Department. So I would like to say that, before I start, that our general manager of this department, Mike Molinari, is joining us virtually from home because he's under the weather. So he'll be making comments virtually. And first, I want to thank you, Acting Mayor Crone. And there are three items on the agenda today. And the first item is the Water and Wastewater Master Plan update. Could I have a mover, please? Thank you very much, Councillor Crone. So the report is moved by Councillor Crone, and General Manager Molinari, do you have any comments?
Yes, thank you. And through you, Madam Chair, yeah, we're very pleased to have our draft final master plans for water and wastewater, and also for transportation here at CWC today. As you know, these are very significant projects that have been underway since 2019 and have undergone extensive public consultation, which exceeds the municipal class environmental assessment process. We note the two master plans are based on our official plan population employment projections up to 2051. And in fact, they also include 100% of the White Belt lands, just to be conservative and ensure that in the future we do not have to dig up pipes and upsize infrastructure if and when those lands come on board. Both the TMP and the Water Wastewater Master Plan were completed in lockstep together, as the road network often defines where the water and wastewater infrastructure will go, or vice versa. And that provides us with good looping and connectivity opportunities. I'd also like to thank our project teams for their work, especially Jamal Masadeh for leading the TMP and Ray Rizala for leading the Water Wastewater Master Plan for the town. In terms of next steps, should Council approve today's reports, the master plans will be placed on the public record for review for 30 days. Staff would receive any feedback over that period and can schedule meetings with Council members or others if they wish. At the end of the 30-day review period, staff can make minor adjustments to the plan and file both master plans with the Ministry of the Environment and Parks. Alternatively, Council could also receive the master plan documents and presentations and defer recommendations 2 and 3 in both reports, and staff would return to Council with those 2 recommendations in the future for formal endorsement of the 2 master plans. So with that, we have our 2 master plan consultants with us today who can provide a high-level presentation of each of the master plans and answer any questions that Council may have. So with that, I'll pass it over to our project consultant, Antoine Lahaye from WSP, to walk us through the Water and Wastewater Master Plan.
Mr. Chairman, Councillor, Town staff, good afternoon. My name is Antoine Lahaye. I'm here today representing the team from WSP to present the findings of the 2023 Town of East Gwillimbury Water and Wastewater Master Plan update. The following is a summary of the full master plan and the recommendations that will be put forth as part of this process. WSP and town staff have been working together towards a final master plan recommendation report being submitted to the town as a final product. The full master plan process included stakeholder presentations and PICs. Information included in this presentation is consistent with these milestones and has not significantly changed since that time. Changes that have been captured in this presentation are limited to Woodbine infrastructure to service Woodbine 1 and 2 projects. To complete the master plan process, a 30-day review of the documentation is included and will be the next step. All the details that back up the summary presented today are included in WSP's final report. Can I get the second slide, please? Brief agenda. We'll start our presentation with a project overview and problem statement, followed by a review of planning data used in the master plan. With the stage set, we'll discuss the servicing strategy for both water and wastewater systems, as well as a high-level review of costs. Third slide, please. The master plan update followed phase 1 and 2 of the MCEA process. Phase 1 being identification of problem and opportunities, and phase 2 being the development of alternatives. The town of East Gwillimbury is projected to experience significant growth in population and employment over the next 25 to 30 years. With this growth comes the need to expand the water and wastewater services, but also comes an opportunity to build out these systems in a safe, efficient, and reliable way that can overcome some of the town's existing and projected future challenges. The Water and Wastewater Master Plan being discussed today is an update building from the draft Water and Wastewater Master Plan from 2019. This update was completed alongside the Transportation Master Plan to provide system frameworks anchored in safety, integrity, and smart decision-making, with the final objective of delivering reliable and climate change resilient services to the town's water and wastewater customers. Our master plan update was focused on extending both of the water and wastewater systems into the town's White Belt lands. The White Belt lands are projected for full build-out in the year 2051. In this study, 2 build-out conditions were considered, a 70% and 100% White Belt land build-out. Next slide, please. Part of developing a reliable roadmap for the next 30 years is to align the servicing plans with known town initiatives and other growth-generated plans. To this end, WSP worked very closely with the Transportation Master Plan team in developing the Water and Wastewater Master Plan. Much of what our colleagues from the Transportation Master Plan team provided were direct inputs to the Water and Wastewater Master Plans. In terms of hydraulic parameters considered, WSP studied and sized infrastructure to the highest demand condition, being maximum day for water and wet weather flow for wastewater. This would allow WSP to adequately size future infrastructure to accommodate the highest flow projections. But we did not limit our criteria to just sizing. WSP also considered water quality and constructability of suggested projects. Although the town's water quality meets and exceeds provincial drinking water standards, the town and region continue to address aesthetic water quality concerns outside of the scope of this master plan project. This was in part addressed in the master plan by adequately sizing and not oversizing water infrastructure while developing fully looped and robust water systems that minimize water age. The map shown on screen differentiates between 70% and 100% white belt land growth areas. In planning the servicing infrastructure, it was clear that some infrastructure would fall squarely within the 100% white belt land areas, while other infrastructure would fall squarely in the 70% white belt land areas. However, in other cases, 70% white belt land projects would be built first, but also need to service the 100% white belt land in the future. Or in other cases, the 100% white belt land infrastructure would need to be built ahead of their specific parcels to help service the 70% areas. In either case, WSP considered the alternative with the highest flow requirements and carried these as the final recommendation of this master plan. Slide 5, please. White belt lands are bordered by the red outline. These include both the 70 and 100% growth conditions. The following slides will demonstrate how growth lands are expected to be phased over the next 25 to 30 years. In our master plan, we considered the full build-out of these lands in studying the servicing needs. The timing of the proposed water mains and sewers will be determined based on the development parcel's timeline. Some piping infrastructure was planned to be constructed earlier than the parcel timing due to servicing needs for the adjacent parcel areas. Next slide, please. This map, with a few parcels on the next map, generally show growth outside of the white belt land areas. This growth was captured as part of the 2019 draft master plan. Next. In our current update, population for these parcels, so the blue and part of the oranges, were validated and projects tied to these areas were confirmed as part of our update. So we didn't ignore our past work and we validated that infrastructure recommendations were still the most appropriate as part of our update presented today. Next slide, please. This map and the map that follows show the timing of the white belt lands. The first parcels from these white belt land growth areas, which are part of the 70% white belt lands, are projected to be built and serviced by the year 2045. Next slide, please. And growth within the 70% white belt land extending into the 100% white belt lands are expected to continue into 2051 and beyond in some of the instances. Next slide, please. In developing projects and network solutions, WSP considered two types of projects. The first, projects needed to bring up the baseline level of service for existing customers and users, and the second being growth-generated projects. The maps shown here are the baseline level of service and service improvement projects, and in light of our two first maps shown, i.e. being the blue and green, orange parcels that were reflected in our 2019 master plan. These are mostly projects that were presented as part of the 2019 master plan, and as I mentioned earlier, were again validated as part of the update process. Slide 11, please. This map is the water project map generated as part of this 2023 update. It is focused on the white belt land growth and captures projects that will fall within regional, town, and developer jurisdiction and responsibilities. Again, project recommendations in this master plan are sized to reflect the greater of the 70% or 100% white belt land capacity requirements. Criteria for water included minimum and maximum pressure requirements, availability of fire flow, maximum flow and velocity targets, as well as minimizing head loss in pipes and planning a fully looped network to minimize the impact to water quality. Next slide, please. The Mount Albert area doesn't necessarily have a ton of the white belt lands, so the projects that you see here were carried over from our 2019 draft. We did not have a ton of focus on the Mount Albert systems as part of this particular update. The next slide, please. In reviewing the wastewater systems, existing infrastructure generally had sufficient capacity to deliver an adequate service to existing customers. Projects shown on this map are wastewater projects generated by growth, with many of these being focused on servicing those Whitebelt land growth areas. Again, some of the 100% Whitebelt land projects are required sooner to service the 70% Whitebelt lands. Similarly, some of the 70% Whitebelt land projects being recommended before the 100% Whitebelt lands were sized to accommodate the future 100% Whitebelt lands where applicable. Wastewater project criteria included but were not limited to scouring velocities, preventing surcharge to ground, and the ratio of wastewater flow to pipe capacity. And again, maybe more important for wastewater infrastructure, WSP considered constructability and depth of sewers as part of the alternatives considered. Currently, the master plan reflects the Upper York sewage solution, and this solution will be subject to future studies as details from the regional direction and solutions come out. Next slide, please. Having developed an extensive list of infrastructure project for capital planning, WSP reviewed and provided estimated costs for each project. Now, our slide here categorizes projects in terms of water and wastewater. However, the report will provide much more detail in terms of expected trigger years based on many of the planning maps that we had earlier, as well as divide some of the funding into district charges or developer-driven projects. Final slide, please. And finally, as a quick summary of what we have left to do, WSP submitted the final draft master plan report to the town, and the town has reviewed and provided initial comments. This report, following today's presentation, will be shared for further review. Upon accepting the master plan recommendation, a notice of study completion will be submitted, and filing of the master plan will officially close the project. Also included on the slide here are town and WSP representatives that are available and familiar with the project who can field questions and host any additional conversations if needed. And with the next slide, I believe that brings us to the end of my presentation. I would like to thank council and the town for listening, and I would be happy to field any questions at this time.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Are there any questions from members of committee? Thank you very much. Through Councillor Carruthers.
Thank you. Madam Chair, I just wanted to get clarification on whether we are receiving this or we are endorsing it. It was my understanding that we would be just receiving it. I have quite a lengthy list of questions, and I'm looking forward to those one-on-ones, and I think it would be wrong to endorse if we don't have all our questions answered.
Thank you very much for that question. So it depends on the comfort level of the councillors. We do have a couple of options. We can just receive it today, and then the staff will report back to us, or we could endorse it today subject to staff meeting with councillors outside of the council chambers to answer all of those questions, because it's such a meaty document, as well as number 2, the transportation master plan update as well. So we can either receive it today and then it will come back to us, or we can endorse it subject to staff meeting with council members if they have further questions.
Thank you for that. I would be unable to endorse it without my questions being answered. I think it would not be genuine or transparent to endorse something we haven't had a chance to really sit down with. So I would be in favor of just receiving it today. I do have one question that I would like to be asked today, and that is, when are we going to decommission the lagoons? So I just want to get a timeline on that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much for your question. Would you like to address that, or should we have General Manager Molinari address that?
I believe Mr. Molinari is in the best
Yes,
position to
very
answer
good.
that question.
So General Manager Molinari, would you be able to answer Councillor Carruthers' questions about the lagoons? And
Certainly,
decommissioning
and
them?
through you, Madam Chair. We've been in discussions with the region recently on this matter, and the most recent information we have is that could be as early as 2028. in terms of decommissioning those lagoons, which is good news.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, General Manager Molinari. So seeing no further questions right now, oh, yes. Oh, sorry, Councillor Foster, sorry.
Thank you. Mr. Molinari, I'd like to go one step further with Councillor Carruthers' question. Is there anything specific in this plan that needs to be done that will help us along that road of having the decommissioning take place in 2028? And if there is something in this plan that indicates that, could that be brought forward, I guess more plain and simple, so we understand exactly what this plan needs to do to make that work?
Through you, Madam Chair, the lagoons are regional infrastructure, and the infrastructure that we're looking at is more tied to new development. It's not the trunk systems that support the regional system. The regional system alone needs to be in place to the extent that it needs to be in order to decommission those lagoons. So everything is being done in a fast-track manner, from what I can see at the region, to facilitate that. And the region has a good three-step process three-phase process that they're looking at implementing. And the lagoon decommissioning is happening essentially right after the initial phase goes through, which provides the surfacing capacity to enable those lagoons to be taken offline.
Thank you very much. Oh, yes, Councillor Roy DeClemente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Mr. LaHaye. Thank you for your presentation, and I was scribbling new words and new phrases, scouring velocities and head loss. It was actually pretty exciting to think that we were talking about underground pipes. But I wonder if you might be able to share with us any of the work that you did around inflow and infiltration, and whether there's new technologies out there that would streamline our water systems and make them a little bit tighter.
Through you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I think when we talk about infiltration and inflow, we need to be careful to separate water and wastewater. Infiltration and inflow is traditionally tied to the wastewater and the sewer systems. Aging infrastructure tends to crack. Now, there is a baseline level of I&I that is expected through joint fusion and other pieces of infrastructure. However, as infrastructure does age and cracks, infiltration and inflow, or I&I, does increase. We've done a lot of extensive work in other jurisdictions to help monitor and reduce I&I. Monitoring is generally speaking, the first step. Understanding where are your problem areas, because not all areas are as problematic as others. And then that would generally be followed by sewer lining projects. You don't necessarily always need to rip up roads and rebuild infrastructure to kind of mitigate the impacts of I&I. In some instances where upsizing is needed in light of growth, upsizing, ripping up streets might be warranted. But there are plenty of solutions like lining sewers that can help and minimize I&I, and generally speaking, help increase or provide additional capacity to systems that are already established.
That was precisely where I was going, is if we can minimize I&I, then we can increase capacity and we can increase flows, and we can start to address some of that infrastructure deficit that we're talking about, and perhaps even take the lagoons offline sooner. And I think that's, the lagoons were promised to be taken offline in the first iteration of YDSS, not the subsequent one. So, it's not your circus, but it's certainly the monkeys that have been on our back for quite some time. Thank you.
Pleasure.
I would like to, at this point, ask the mover, Councillor Crone, if he would consider, as General Manager Molinari stated at the beginning of dealing with this item, that item number 1, master plan, and item number 2, master plan, the transportation master plan, are lockstep together. And so if we would consider at this point, rather than voting on item number 1, we would receive the presentation for number 2 and then consider voting on both together.
Madam Clerk, I would throw that to you. I'm not sure that is workable, but get your opinion.
Through you, Mr. Acting Mayor, Councillor Pileggi, I believe that each item is to be dealt with distinctly. What I did hear at the beginning of the discussion, there was a proposal by Councillor Carruthers to simply receive this item and allow for staff to carry out the one-on-one feedback sessions with members of council and have the report come back for committee's consideration at that point of time, taking into account that the feedback provided. So perhaps the intention right now is to just simply receive the items.
Right. Thank you. Are there any further questions before we proceed to a vote to receive? Yes, Councillor Roy Clementi.
Thank you. Just wondering, through you to Mr. Molinari, I guess it's one thing for us to receive, it's another thing for us to move the item forward and ask for staff to issue a notice of completion so that they can also gather feedback from the public, so that we're not just gathering feedback from ourselves, but from other stakeholders in the organization. Is that what we were hoping to do, so that we can in theory adopt or massage the first two resolutions?
Through you, Madam Chair. Essentially, once council approves or endorses the documents, then they would be officially starting a 30-day review period on the public record. In reality, the master plan documents are in a continuous review period until they're finally approved. So it's really a detail. You know, if council would like to have some one-on-ones, we're happy to do that. My suggestion would be to just, you know, not put this on the 30-day review period officially, because that kind of gets into some process issues potentially, and we would be able to schedule some meetings with council, answer some questions, and then this report, the two reports would come back, and recommendations 2 and 3 would be handled at a future council meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Molinari. That really helps. I think it would be smart for us to simply receive and allow for that feedback to take place before the clock starts ticking on the 30-day period. Thank you.
So any further questions? Yes, Councillor Johns.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and just through you, I just want to, I'm sitting here listening, and everybody knows newbie councillor, and I'm looking at the timelines, and I'm looking on the amount of work. And this will go for the next master plan that we speak to, just to save everybody's time. I'm just so crazy impressed with the amount of work that's gone into it, the consultants, the staff. It's just bonkers to get your head around the amount of work. I'm glad that we're looking to receive it. It gives me some more time to digest. This is generational work that's happening, and I just, we have incredible staff here at the town, and the consultants, thank you very much for all the hard work and effort. So thank you.
So seeing no further questions, I'd like to proceed with a vote on receiving the master plan, the water and wastewater master plan update, receiving it only at this time. So all those in favor of the motion as presented?
It's not as presented, it's as amended.
Yes.
Thank
Okay.
you.
All those in favor of receiving the motion as amended? Thank you very much. The motion is carried. And General Manager Molinari, is there any other comments you'd like to make on that before we move on to item number 2?
No, that's it for me, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. So item number 2 is the Transportation Master Plan update. And could I have a mover for that? Thank you, Councillor Johns. And the report is
Point
moved
of
by...
order, what are we, what motion are we putting on the table? Because I'm thinking if we are putting all 3 on the table, we end up in the same situation.
Yes.
We're just
Yes.
putting receipt on
We're
the table?
Yes, we're putting receipt on the table for items number 2, and, but I don't believe that's necessary for item number 3. Just items number 1 and 2, we are,
Sorry, items 1 and 2?
yes. Yes.
I don't
Items number
understand. I
1
don't understand. Item 1, right?
Yes, we just passed the motion as amended for item number 1.
Right.
To receive that master report.
Right.
Update, master plan update, and now we're moving on to item number 2, which is the Transportation Master Plan update, which we are going to have a presentation on, and we are considering receiving that.
Okay,
today.
you just asked for motions to be put on the floor. I'm just asking what motions are being put on the floor. That's all
The
I'm
motion
asking.
to receive.
Just
the
to receive?
transportation. Yes, just to receive.
Not the other two that are on the agenda.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, just to receive item number 2, Transportation Master Plan Update. And it was moved by Councillor Johns. So, General Manager Molinari, do you have any comments on item number 2, Transportation Master Plan Update?
Yes, through you, Madam Chair. Just to move this along, I'll pass it over to Jonathan Chai from HDR to walk us through the Transportation Master Plan. Over to you, Jonathan.
Thank you, Mr. Molinari, and good afternoon to Mr. Chair and members of Council. My name is Jonathan Chai, Transportation Planning Lead at HDR Corporation and the Consultant Project Manager for the Transportation Master Plan Study for the town of East Gwillimbury. So if we could move to the next slide, please. So just an overview of the presentation today. I'll be starting with an overview of the study and then walking you through the different elements of the Transportation Master Plan and our recommendations. Next slide. And next slide, please. So the goals of the Transportation Master Plan are identified on this slide. The Transportation Master Plan, or TMP, and I'll start using that acronym more frequently, so to save me a mouthful. So the goal of the TMP is to update the town's previously approved 2010 TMP study, and the reason for the update is to build from the growth target inputs from the official plan, which was updated in 2022, to accommodate the expansion of the urban boundary into the White Belt lands by 2051. I also want to add that the update considers the updated planning context as well, including the provincial Greater Golden Horseshoe Transportation Plan, plans for the Bradford Bypass, Metrolinx plans, York Region's updated 2022 TMP, and also the changing socio-economic context, which includes new technology advancements, increased work from home, new concepts like walkable 15-minute communities, the climate emergency, affordable housing, growing concerns about roadway safety and speeding, and addressing social equity as well. So it's important to update these plans continually as your context evolves. The TMP will also serve as a blueprint to make decisions about developing the town's future transportation network to 2051, and it will guide development as it occurs. It'll also focus on multimodal transportation, connectivity, and accessibility in the network, promoting community prosperity and sustainability, and finally supporting the town's vision for a safe, accessible, and livable community in the future. Next slide. So the Transportation Master Plan follows phases 1 and 2 of the municipal class environmental assessment process, and building on that, it recommends projects and then an implementation plan where we identify the projects in some detail so that they may move forward with subsequent phases of the municipal class EA process. We also provide development charge cost estimates as an input to the DC background study, and also identify policies for funding and monitoring as well. And all of that is captured in our final Transportation Master Plan report. Next slide, please. So the problem and opportunity statement, next slide, establishes why we're doing this study and what we need to address over the course of the study. It represents the completion of phase 1 of the EA process, and it was developed with input from staff, stakeholders, and the public at the outset of the study. And the statement reads that the town of East Gwillimbury's plan to grow significantly over the next 30 years, and this growth will result in more and shorter trips in the town, putting added strain on the town's internal transportation network. And the key opportunities include supporting all modes of travel, cars, transit, on-road and off-road active transportation, identifying gaps in opportunities in the transportation network, accommodating growth to 2051 and beyond, supporting both existing and future land uses in the town, and ultimately developing a well-integrated, sustainable, and multimodal transportation network. Next slide. Next slide, please. So in terms of public consultation, since the study was initiated back in 2016, we've consulted with the public throughout the study following the EA process. And with the first public open house in March 2018, which presented the problem and opportunity statement, public open house number 2 in April 2019, which presented the alternative solutions in our draft recommendations. And then we did present to Council back in October 2019 on the draft recommendations, which was at that time to the 2041 horizon year. Since that time, however, the province updated their growth projections to the 2051 horizon year, which then prompted York Region to update its official plan as well as the town. And now at this time, we've incorporated all that information and updated the TMP to reflect this updated information. So the draft recommendations were presented to the public back in April 2023 this year. And now we are before you today presenting our refined TMP report following that round of public consultation and incorporating the latest inputs to our report. And as mentioned previously in the discussion with the water wastewater plan, following this meeting, any further refinements can be made to the report following a 30-day review period. Next slide, please. So just some notes about what we heard over the course of the study. Firstly, that the residents who attended the meetings and provided input want better access to transit. They identified gaps in the sidewalk network, which they'd like to address. There's a limited cycling network, so also opportunities to improve cycling infrastructure for people who want to cycle and to encourage more people to cycle in the town. Identified congestion hotspots for traffic, including Green Lane and Yonge, as well as Green Lane and Leslie. Also identified the desire for the Highway 400 or 404 link, also known as the Bradford Bypass, and also indicate some support for the plans that were recommended for infrastructure expansion into the White Belt lands as well. Next slide. So diving into some of the scenarios that we considered and tested to arrive at a preferred future town transportation network. Next slide, please. So just this slide here just summarizes some key assumptions which we followed to update the TMP to serve the White Belt lands. So firstly, we built on the draft 2041 horizon year recommendations by considering the expansion into the urban boundary, expansion to the urban boundary, which on the map on the side there is shown in blue, and the 70% White Belt land expansion is shown in the yellow areas on the map there, while the 100% White Belt lands are shown in red. And the distinction there is that the 70% lands are approved by York Region, while the additional 100% White Belt lands are subject to further approvals. So in addition to the urban boundary expansions, we also incorporated the York Region Transportation Master Plan recommendations, as well as the town's own completed secondary plans, such as the Green Lane West study and the 404 employment lines secondary plan. Next slide. So throughout the course of the work, we considered 4 town-wide transportation network alternative scenarios, which were tested as alternative solutions. So the first scenario being a base case where only committed road improvements by the province, York Region, and the town were included in our network. Then we tested a current plan scenario where we only included the 2010 TMP recommendations as well as the prior 2012 Active Transportation and Trails Master Plan. And then we tested scenario 3, which was a revised town network where we identified additional opportunities to improve and provide additional connectivity in the town's network. And then finally, scenario 4 was what we called an enhanced town network, where we built on scenario 3, but provided additional on-street cycling facilities on both existing and new roads and incorporated travel demand management policies and programs. Next slide. So a comprehensive multiple account evaluation approach was conducted to evaluate these scenarios and arrive at a preferred scenario. Some of the criteria included improving transportation service, addressing social equity needs, supporting the current policy environment, supporting affordability in the transportation system, addressing natural environment or minimizing natural environment impacts, as well as supporting the socioeconomic environment. And ultimately, we recommended scenario 4 as the preferred scenario, as it supports the multimodal vision for the town to provide a safe, accessible, and connected network for all users. Next slide. So the recommended 2051 road network is shown on the screen here. You can see new roadway connections identified in the white belt lands, and new roads are identified as the dotted lines, the skinnier dotted lines on the map there. New road reconstructions are the wider dotted lines that are shown more so in the rural areas of the town. New interchange is identified at Doan Road, and this follows the York Region TMP recommendation. Intersection improvements are noted, either signalization or jog eliminations in the triangles shown on the map. A new grade separation on Green Lane at the Barrie Go rail line is identified as well. Roundabouts are shown in the circles. There's also a recommendation to transfer the jurisdiction of Queensville Side Road from the town to York Region between Woodbine Avenue and York Durham Line, so towards the east in the rural part of the roadway. And the Bradford bypass is identified as well, and the mid-block 404 crossing of Highway 404 between Doan Road and Queensville Side Road. So all key elements of the recommended network. Next slide. And then the recommended 2051 pedestrian network and sidewalk network is shown, and it incorporates both new and wider sidewalks, filling in the gaps that were mentioned, as well as multi-use pathways to be implemented in the boulevard. We also identified priorities for sidewalk implementation to guide decision-making for the town moving forward, starting with proximity to sensitive land uses where vulnerable users such as children or seniors may be wanting to use the network, as well as roadways with higher speeds and traffic volumes, or average annual daily traffic, which is what AADT stands for. And also noted that streetlights are typically provided with sidewalks and multi-use paths within the urban boundary roadways. Next slide. And the recommended 2051 cycling network is shown on the map here, and this was developed in concert with the Active Transportation Master Plan update, which is currently being finalized as well. And new projects identified here include sharrows on lower speed, lower traffic volume roadways throughout the town, on-street bike lanes, as well as in-boulevard multi-use pathways. Next slide. And then finally, the proposed 2051 transit network is shown on the screen, and it builds largely on York Region TMP plans in terms of the rapid transit network extension up Yonge Street and across Green Lane, as well as the mobility on request service, which is proposed for the town in the region's plans. Another key recommendation that we've made in the town's TMP is to explore first last mile solutions such as eco-mobility hub concepts located throughout the town at various community hubs and potentially dispersed throughout communities as well. And these eco-mobility hubs are essentially single point locations for multiple shared mobility services. So e-scooter share, e-bike share, potentially car share stations in communities to give people options to not necessarily own a car, but they will have access to car share through this concept. And then finally, the last key recommendation there is improving access to the GO station, particularly for active transportation and providing the infrastructure connection to that location, so that everybody doesn't have to drive to the GO station. Next slide. And finally, our implementation recommendations. Next slide, please. So we made several transportation policy recommendations that were developed through the study. Firstly, we reviewed existing policies and recommended updates based on the latest provincial and industry guidance. And this may include the Ontario Traffic Manual and the Transportation Association of Canada guidelines. We also developed a few policy recommendations which are new, which I'll highlight in a bit more depth. Firstly, road ecology, which considers the impacts of road construction on the environment, particularly as it relates to wildlife migration and habitat fragmentation. New roads and road improvements in the town should consider mitigating impacts to the environment as much as possible, particularly through subsequent environmental assessment processes for any new road or road improvements. The dead-end turnaround policy for roadways has been identified as well, which recommends that the town update its engineering standard drawings and design criteria to incorporate drawings which allow for safe turnarounds. This could include cul-de-sacs or something called hammerhead turnarounds as well. Climate change, similar to road ecology, subsequent design phases and environmental assessment process of recommended projects should consider mitigation and adaptation measures to reduce the impacts, such as designing and accounting for more frequent and severe weather events. And then finally, the final one that I'll talk about is the new mobility technologies, which present an opportunity to address existing gaps in the network, provide more choice and first and last mile connections to transit services via automated shuttles, shared e-bike or e-scooter systems, as mentioned through the Eco Mobility Hub recommendation. And next slide. So just running through the key items in the implementation plan, key actions. Firstly, conducting required further studies for the recommended projects, particularly subsequent phase 3 and 4 of the environmental assessment process. Continued coordination with York Region, Metrolinx Go Transit, and the Ministry of Transportation. Incorporating roundabouts into new subdivision planning in Green Lane West, Sharon, and Queensville. Implementing travel demand management measures as a condition of site plan approval. Enabling and promoting electric vehicle and carpool parking spaces at different locations in the town, as well as through development as well. Next slide. And number 6, implementing transportation policies to better manage the existing system and to reduce speeds in quiet residential areas, to enhance pedestrian cyclist comfort and safety on town streets. Number 7, identifying and leveraging funding sources beyond the development charges program. Number 8, integrating the TMP recommendations into the various planning documents, including feeding back into the official plan. And then finally, number 9, updating the TMP every 5 years to account for the changes to the planning context, as I mentioned at the start of the presentation. And the final table on the slide there is our estimated order of magnitude cost of the recommendations. In total, it's nearly $800 million in 2023 dollars, I believe. But this is projected over 30 years to the 2051 horizon. And we identified allocations which provide input to the development charges study where growth related projects would be allocated $675 million and $92 million approximately to the tax base over that 30-year period. So that's it. I think next slide is just for questions, and thank you.
Thank you very much. That was a very thorough presentation. We appreciate that. And General Manager Molinar, do you have any comments before I ask for questions?
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. Nothing at this time.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from members of committee? Yes, Councillor Johns?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, I'm wondering, when you're establishing the program costs, and it is over the course of those 30 years, the number that you are arriving at when you're landing at close to that 800 million from start to finish, are you also adding in a repair and replacement cost into that as you are building that out?
Through you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the question. So the costs shown in the presentation are capital costs only, so it doesn't include the full life cycle operations and maintenance as mentioned.
So that would be up to us to come up with our own asset management program on that?
That's correct. Yes.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much for that question. So I'm going to, Councillor Roy DeClemente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Mr. Chai. I've asked this of the regional folks when they came to give us our presentation on their master plan, the transportation master plan. We're looking at 30 years plus. Did you consider the impact that autonomous vehicles and the need for charging stations might have on these plans going forward?
Through you, Madam Chair, apologies. In terms of autonomous vehicles, I think it wasn't explicitly identified, but I think generally speaking that the potential that may have, or the potential impact that autonomous vehicles may have on the transportation system remains to be seen very much. Whether or not privately owned autonomous vehicles are allowed, for example, that may have an impact significantly as more people would be able to drive if they were to own their own vehicle. Youth or seniors may be able to take their car, autonomous car, wherever they may want to go. This is something that I understand, and we were supporting the ministry on the Greater Golden Transportation Plan, Greater Golden Horseshoe Transportation Plan, which tested different scenarios of both privately owned and publicly owned. So it is a big question and a big unknown right now as to that specific item or to your question. As for electric vehicles, I think as mentioned in the presentation, it is recommended that the town encourage its adoption due to the sustainability benefits. And as we saw in the deputation earlier, a lot of electricity is needed to charge these vehicles throughout the town. So I think there's a lot of movement towards supporting that transition, and it is something that the town, as we're recommending, consider strongly.
Any further questions? Yes, Councillor Carruthers.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm happy to see road ecology in there, but more than just a definition and should be implemented, what does this master plan do for road ecology?
Thank you for the question, and through you, Madam Chair. So, I mean, this study is a high-level study and identifies policies and recommendations. I think it is appropriate for the study to identify that issue and to identify how to address that issue. And how to address that issue, as noted, is through subsequent municipal class environmental assessment study and preliminary design, which will identify those mitigative measures, which may reduce the impact on wildlife habitat and fragmentation that is caused by infrastructure development that the town may be pursuing through this study. So.
Okay, so I'm still just a little bit confused. So in the report, it talks about how this came before council in July of 2022, and we were told it would be addressed in this plan. And so I'm not really seeing it addressed in this plan. It's being referred to in this plan. But what I'm hearing from you now is that if we want to address road ecology, it's not going to be in this plan because it's too high level.
Through you, Madam Chair, that is correct. I mean, further design work needs to happen in order to actually implement infrastructure which addresses the issue, if that's fair.
Okay. So then I'm going to think about how to word this, but I think we need a further recommendation from council if we actually want to get serious about road ecology, because our recommendation from July of 22 said it would be addressed in this plan, and it's just being referred to at this point. So I think if we want to do something about road ecology, we'll need a further recommendation from council. And through you, Madam Chair, I'm wondering if maybe Mr. Velchik, our CAO, could respond to how we get road ecology addressed, because it seems like it's not going to be through this plan that we were told it would be addressed through.
Madam Chair, through you, I think what I'm understanding, and I'd have to have further conversation with Mr. Molinari, but what I'm understanding is that this sets the stage for highlighting the importance of road ecology in the transportation master plan, and that through more detailed design and implementation phases of the transportation infrastructure, at that point, those details would be sort of considered more specifically. But I'm wondering if Mr. Molinari has anything he could add in terms of, is there anything we can do at this phase to potentially strengthen that commitment?
Sure, and through you, Madam Chair, typically road ecology would be part of an EA process. This, as Mr. Chai has mentioned, this overall master plan provides the framework of those things that can be considered for future and more detailed analysis as things go forward. So if we have a road project that's coming forward that's going through an EA process, there will be a road ecology component of that we would undertake that would also determine if there was more work that would need to be done in that area. So you know, I guess road ecology isn't necessary on every road in the town, but there are roads where it certainly is applicable to. And the question is, how do we get those roads that that need road ecology associated with them to be added into the mix? And part of that opportunity is when those roads are reconstructed. That's when those matters come to play. Another mechanism that we may be able to use is have go through maybe a higher level study where through an environmental program that identifies some of those potential locations that we should that to highlight them so that we know when those road projects come forward that we have a bit of a heads up that those are there. And that could be something that we would do outside of the master plan process.
And thank you very much. That's exactly what I was expecting to see in this. I anxiously awaiting for this to come forward so we could see what we were going to do for road ecology. And so I was a little disappointed when it wasn't much more than a definition and a lot of shoulds and can. I don't think that, I try to stay out of the weeds, and I don't want to get into the weeds with every single road project to try and find out what are we doing for road ecology here. It'd be very nice if in the master plan, at that level, we can get a commitment to road ecology. And I just don't find that this goes far enough, or the words aren't strong enough for me to feel like we can take our foot off the gas and leave this to staff to execute. But what I'm hearing is that every time we get a road plan, we're going to have to be pushing for road ecology, because left to a should or can, there is no must, and it may not happen. So I don't want to get to the position where we are micromanaging every road project, and would love to see road ecology actually addressed at a higher level. Thank you.
In terms of my understanding from General Manager Molinari's comments, he did indicate that the master plan provides the framework for more detailed analysis and the mechanisms in the future to follow through with your concerns about road ecology. So.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It was the should and can that I was emphasizing, that if we leave it to each individual road project, then we're going to have to push at each individual road project to go from a should or can to a must. And so that's what I was asking for specifically. And I see Mr. Velchik is nodding his head, so maybe he can add to that. Thank you.
Madam Chair, I'm just wondering, perhaps this is something you can leave with staff. If you're receiving this item today and we're going to come back to you, we could give that a little more thought, because it's, I want to talk to Mr. Molinari a little more offline on this, but it's possible we can strengthen the language in terms of what shall be done when these environmental assessments are being conducted related to either road reconstruction or new road construction projects. And so it won't be an optional exercise. It'll be something that must be considered as part of that process. But if you can leave that with us, we can certainly contemplate what that might look like when it comes back to you.
Thank you, CEO Velchik. And Councillor Roy DeClementi?
If I could respond to that. I would like to add a motion to that effect, that staff will be bringing something back on road ecology. I want to just make sure that that's not lost, because we have been waiting for this, and I appreciate what you're saying, and I think that addressing it in a bigger way, if it's not going to be within the master plan, then going back to that original recommendation from council would be good to look at. Thank you. I'm wondering if the clerk would have something, some language around that, what we should be
Councillor
adding.
Brothers? Yes, thank you. I think we need to vote on this item and I suggest that we proceed as we proceeded with item number 1, that we simply receive it with the amendment as we did with item number 1 in terms of the time period for consultation, and that we can defer it and have it come back so that others have the opportunity to speak with General Manager Molinari. So if there, and then we'll deal with a separate motion for Councillor Carruthers. Yes, Councillor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to speak to the matter of road ecology. I understand that it's not part of the scope of the TMP. I don't know. I don't think it's appropriate for us to be, every time there is a road reconstruction project, for us to be asking that question. it's a challenge as it is, although we probably could with the next item on our agenda, which has some road reconstruction work there. But like Mr. Valchich said, I think it's important for us to leave it with staff. We have staff who are out on our roads all the time. And maybe it's a question of pulling some data from our work order system where there's a high incidence of roadkill so that we can identify those, I'll think of it as a heat map perspective, but maybe there are those areas within the town that are connected in with our natural heritage systems that we can identify as being hot spots so that when those road projects do come, staff are already primed to alert the design team that some additional measures might be necessary. Thank you.
So I'd like to proceed at this time, if there are no other further comments or questions, I'd like to proceed with a vote on the motion as amended, if that's agreeable with you, Councillor Johns, because you moved this particular motion, and that we deal with it the same way we dealt with the master plan item number 1.
Yep, my intention when we were looking for a mover was to move it simply to receive it. If that is fine with everybody, happy to let it stand. I'm happy to rescind that and make it easier for another amendments and whatnot, but my intention was to move it just for receipt.
So, Madam Clerk, shall we proceed with the vote now? Oh, very good. So, seeing no further questions, I'm going to call to vote. All those in favor of the motion as amended, with regard to delaying the 30-day review period and allowing staff to communicate with council members. So all those in favor of the motion as amended? Very good. The motion is carried. And we will move on to item number 3 on the agenda.
Sorry, Madam Chair, I had a motion on the floor. You said we were going to deal with it after we received.
Thank you very much, Councillor Carruthers. So Councillor Carruthers has put forward a motion on the floor, and would you mind, the clerk, yes, if you could read that motion
Through you,
to
Madam
us?
Chair, just bear with me for a moment. Councillor Carruthers, I've captured what I thought would be the intent, but I'm going to put that on the screen for committee's review.
Thank you.
And so I will read it out loud so that we understand what we're voting on. Be it resolved that council requests that staff provide further information with respect to road ecology and opportunities to further address road ecology as part of the Transportation Master Plan update. Are there any questions or comments before we vote? Seeing no question, Councillor Roy DeClemente.
I might suggest that we just ask them to address road ecology, period. I don't know if it's necessarily part of the master plan update. And if it is, then we're going to have to ask them to revise their $800 million price tag, I think. So I think I'd rather keep it separate. Thank you.
And so, Councillor Carruthers, since this is your motion, shall we make that friendly amendment of removing the last portion of the sentence?
So that wouldn't be a friendly amendment because that changes the intention of it. And if we're going to take out as part of the master plan update, then we would need to look at putting a date on it. And I'm not sure I want to tie staff's hands to that. We've already been waiting since July of 2022, and it was told it would be addressed in this. So I think it's part of this. And to Councillor Roy DeClemente's comment, I don't think they need to rewrite the whole master plan, but it would just be something that would be addressed in this. Could be a refer to the separate report or whatever. But I want to tie to this because that was our original motion from council, that it would be addressed in this. So I'd like to leave my motion as it stands. Thank you.
And Madam Clerk, how?
Through you, Madam Chair, I believe it's up to committees to address this, so you may call for a vote on the motion as
is.
Correct.
Very good. We'll call for a vote on the motion as is with no amendments. All those in favor of the motion as presented? And the motion is carried. Moving on to item number 3. The road and sidewalk design update. And could I have a mover for this, please? Councillor Crone. The report is moved by Councillor Crone. General Manager Molinari, do you have any comments?
Yes, through you, Madam Chair. The memo is for council's information, so staff intend on reaching out to residents and hosting a drop-in style PIC on December 6th at the Civic Center to discuss 3 projects, which include the Mount Albert Sidewalk in Sharon from Con Drive to the Sports Complex, the Center Street and Queensville Side Road intersection reconstruction, and also the Rogers Road reconstruction. So residents directly fronting the sites will receive notice by mail, and the public will be notified via social media, the town website, and e-news. And happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, General Manager Molinari. So are there any questions from members of committee with regard to this update? Seeing none, I'd like to call for the vote. All those in favor of the motion as presented? The motion is carried. And do you have any final comments, General Manager Molinari, for the committee?
Nothing further at this time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will now pass the chair back to you, Acting Mayor Crone.
Thank you, Councillor. We are now at item H, administration, with myself and the chair, and we have an update on the administration report, East Gwillimbury Multi-Year Accessibility Plan. Mr. Velchich, are you taking carriage of this?
Mr. Chairman, I would refer this to Ms. Gandhi, who may wish to make a few preliminary comments. I think the report is well written, and I think it's fairly self-explanatory, but this is a big strategic area of importance for us, so I would ask her if she'd like to make any comments.
Over to you, Ms. Gandhi.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we are presenting to Council for approval the multi-year accessibility plan. I want to acknowledge the work of Chris McPherson and the Human Resources, soon-to-be People and Belonging Department, who has led the initiative, as well as the Staff Accessibility Working Group, Communications for their support, and of course the Accessibility Advisory Committee of Council, which has been involved in the development of this report. This is a mandatory plan, and it does require council approval prior to us submitting it to the province. It covers a number of areas as articulated in the report and in the staff report itself. I'm happy to take any questions that members of council may have.
Any, actually, I think first of all I should ask for a mover for this receipt, Councillor Foster. Any questions? Councillor Leahy, go ahead.
Thank you very much. Through you, Councillor Crone. I wanted to make the comment, since I'm the council liaison for the Accessibility Advisory Committee, that this report is welcomed, and that the Advisory Committee for Accessibility looks forward to working with staff liaison to go through the goals and the missions over the next 5 years to see the implementation of all of these. Now, I do have one question that is important for public information, and that is, are there any potential financial impacts of implementing the multi-year accessibility plan?
Ms. Gandhi, over to you.
Yes, sorry, through you, Mr. Chair. Well, there are financial impacts, but those are already considered in the 2023 budget recommendation. So, for example, training for accessibility and that type of thing is already incorporated in the planned budget for 2023. Anything related to building and standards of that nature are in fact already incorporated into the building code, and so those would be part of whatever infrastructure requirements are needed for the municipality and would be incorporated in those capital costs.
Okay.
Thank you for sharing that with everyone. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Councillor Carruthers, please go ahead.
More of a comment. At the school board, we had something called Barrier Busters, which was a form with a link right on the main web page that made it very easy to report when someone found there was a barrier, and it could be physical or sensory or attitudinal. There was a whole drop-down menu of different things that you could click on, and I think that that helps us, rather than trying to do everything all at once. Let's find out where the biggest problems are and allow people to easily report this. So that's just a suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you, that's helpful.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Okay, see none. We are not only receiving this, but we're being asked to approve, and that council requests staff to determine resources required to implement, and that council requests staff present a report on the status for the plan for the duration, and that this report be posted on the East Gwillimbury website. Okay. All those in favor? None opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you very much. All right, we will move on to item number 2, the administration report on the East Gwillimbury Housing Pledge. Mr. Velchich, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Not really much to add on this. I think the memo is self-explanatory. Staff are happy to respond to any questions, but this really is just speaking to the how portion of the town's commitment to growing and producing much-needed housing by 2031. And you can see that one of the things that the memo does refer to is that the town certainly feels it's well-positioned to do its part, but that it is also dependent on other partners in the process, including other levels of government and development industry, et cetera, to make this happen. But I think the town's well-positioned. So staff are happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay. Can I have a mover for this portion of the agenda? Councillor Leahy. Are there any questions? Seeing none, I will call for the vote. All those in favor? Any opposed? Okay, motion is carried. That brings us down to item I on the agenda, and if looking at council, I thought maybe we would take a 10-minute recess if we could, just to stretch our legs. Any opposition to that? Seeing none, I'm going to declare a 10-minute recess. Please keep it to a quick 10. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, just bear with us for a moment. We're just experiencing some technical issues.
Okay, and we're back. We're now into item I, Development Services, with Councillor Roy D. Clemente in the chair. Over to you, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My apologies, my computer decided it wanted to restart during our recess, and it bumped me out of the meeting and told me that it needed a whole new lease on life. Anyway, so we have several important items on our agenda today. The first one is regarding our updated Servicing Allocation Policy. Ms. Bégin, would you care to lead us through this one, please?
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. I won't repeat what's already contained in the report because I believe it reflects some very rigorous analysis and robust discussions with members of council. What we've attempted to do is to reflect back what we heard in terms of council's priorities and alignment with the strategic plan and balance that with what the input we continue to receive from the development community. The recommendation are provided as an either-or option because there wasn't, I think, either one is defensible. The one that's that staff highlighted relates more to more recent conversations about the need to emphasize ICI development and the need to focus on diversity of housing stock in order to be able to support objectives around attainability, but also to support objectives around attracting the workforce that aligns with the job creation targets. So happy to answer any questions that council may have or speak to the methodology if there are any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Bégin, and I wanted to recognize the efforts that you and your team have put together. This has been several months in coming, and it's not an easy one. This has been a big challenge for the whole organization as we work towards trying to address this issue and the incredible demand that we have for what a very minimal resource. Before I go to questions, I'm just wondering if I can have someone put a motion on the table and we can start that discussion with questions and so on. Councillor Crothers?
I was going to ask of staff what recommendation they are recommending. We have these two competing ones, and I was going to put that one on the floor.
Okay.
So I hear what you're asking for, but I'm asking if that would be okay.
I think Ms. Bégin did indicate that it was the second. Am I
Okay.
correct, Ms. Bégin?
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, that's, you'll see towards the end of the report, staff's opinion prioritizing the new developments and the diversity of housing stock and ICI. And I should note that this is in the context of identifying with a very small envelope of allocation reserve what we're prioritizing in terms of what goes first and what would help the municipality achieve its immediate aims. It's not to suggest that these other very worthy projects are never going to go forward. It's just more of a sequencing and prioritization exercise.
Thank you. I am happy to put that on the floor along with receipt and the fourth recommendation to direct staff to employ the weighted criteria.
Thank you, Councillor Crothers. Madam Clerk, you have noted that. Do we have any questions? Councillor Leahy.
Thank you very much, through you, Madam Chair. I have a question about the report because there are a couple of important questions that I thought the information was not included in the report, and that is so that everyone understands what we're talking about, rather than talking about it in terms of percentages, exactly how many units are there in the reserve. I thought that information would be important to include in the report, as well as how many units remain unused with developers that they are sitting on.
Ms. Bégin, I think that information was contained in the prior reports that came to us. Was it in September? I think it was in your September report to us.
I believe, through you, Madam Chair, just the use of percentages was intentional to allow council flexibility in terms of sort of prioritizing and objectives, and recognizing that there are projects that we may not be aware of or have not considered that council may still wish to entertain and not to sort of be locked into. The other reason for using percentages versus discrete numbers was through the ongoing discussions with the development community, there has been some discussion around the validity of the numbers, and suggestions that there may be some allocation that is still owed to a developer through existing agreements, and just out of an abundance of caution and making sure that we explore all those options, didn't want to tie this to a specific number if in fact there are still some adjustments to be made. So whether it's 1,062, which is the number we're working with, or we believe that is as close as possible to the accurate number, but if that number were to change, that's why we opted for the percentage structure.
Thank you, Ms. Boucher. Further?
Yes, I have a further follow-up question. In terms of the recent developments with the YDSS and the plans of twinning the YDSS and how much that's going to cost, what are the timelines for that? And because it's important to know and understand if we're being asked to make decisions that may create a different perspective on the allocations with the plans from the region.
Ms. Boucher?
Through you, Madam Chair, I'll defer to General Manager Molinari to speak to the timelines of the YDSS, but would just caution that this report deals with the allocation reserve specifically, and which is a subset of allocation in general, and the intent of this update is not to adjust how the agreements in terms of front-ending the infrastructure are formed. That would be its own process going forward. But maybe my colleague can speak to the timelines for YDSS.
Mr. Molinari, go ahead, please.
Through you, Madam Chair. The region has provided us with some preliminary dates in terms of what that looks like. There's 3 phases that are being proposed. The first phase would be up until 2027-28, which will provide approximately 25,000 persons. Then we would have the phase 2, which would be complete in roughly 2023. Which would provide roughly another 30,000 persons of capacity. And then phase 3 would be approximately 2036, which would provide approximately 85,000 persons of capacity.
And just for clarification, Mr. Molinari, phase 2 was it 2030?
It was roughly complete by 2031.
2031, okay. And those population numbers you're quoting, those are for the region, not for EG? Those are
not just EG. That is what that infrastructure, when they do those infrastructure improvements, that is the capacity that'll be provided that would be shared amongst a number of communities, great, including EG.
Thank you. Okay. I'm going to see if anyone else has any other questions at this time, Councillor. Councillor Crone.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Not so much a question, but just to build on your comments from earlier. I know at the beginning of the year we were all struggling with the changes coming at us with Bill 23, and we had a number of vigorous discussions about how we would grapple with it, and I know that this is a way to assist us in that. It's another tool in our toolbox. So I just want to express my appreciation of all the hard work. I know it's been a long slog, but I appreciate everything that's gone into this. And I think it will help us in steering our destiny a little better than before. So thank you again.
Councillor Crothers, go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to check that the language was loose enough that you're not going down to, the last number of allocation to get to 40%. It's going to be, X number exactly. Like, is the language loose enough? Because I'm wondering if we could put not less than or not more than in the language, if that would give you that little bit more flexibility.
Go ahead, please.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. That was the intention of using the language, generally prioritizing. That doesn't tie council to any specific objective or requirement, but what it does do is it guides staff in bringing projects and recommendations forward to be able to focus on what we believed council is prioritizing. So if, just as an example, if council indicates that they are prioritizing diversifying the housing stock and looking for things that offer more attainable options, then that would guide us from perhaps focusing on single detached dwellings, that type of thing. So it's not to say that council wouldn't consider those matters, but it helps us in terms of being able to prioritize and shape what we bring before you.
Perfect. I just want to make sure we're not overly tying your hands. Thank you.
Thank you. And I will draw committee's attention to the correspondence from our Economic Development Advisory Committee that was also sort of supporting, in principle, the direction that we were heading in as well. So they too have actually watched our council deliberations and listened to some of the discussions and came to their own recommendation for our consideration as well. So any further questions? Councillor Leahy.
Thank you very much. Through you, Madam Chair. Yes, I recall from our meeting back in June, Ms. Bégin, we were discussing sewage allocations and prioritizing, and you suggested at the time that there was flexibility in the percentages of the different categories, and so that it was up to council to decide the weight, whether it's 40% for employment-related uses, or we could change it to 30%, et cetera. There was flexibility in terms of that. So I'd like to understand better, between the two options that are being put forward, why in the second option has the category of completing existing communities been completely removed from the percentage allocation?
Through you, Madam Chair. Again, the attempt here is to reflect the discussions and our best understanding of what council's direction has been. And subsequent to the conversations where we presented proposed sort of breakdowns in terms of how the policy or how the allocation might be divided, there were other conversations that suggested that there might be an appetite to focus solely on, as EDAC has suggested, ICI and new developments, I shouldn't say solely, but primarily focus on those, because there is other existing allocation. There are projects that have draft approval and are ready to proceed, and so this is not to suggest that those types of projects will not proceed. This is, again, only dealing with the allocation reserve. But to your point, Councillor Leahy, it is absolutely within council's purview to suggest different alternate percentages. This is merely meant to be a synthesis of what we understood and are reflecting back to council.
Thank you, Ms. Bégin. Any further questions? Councillor Leahy?
Yes, through you, Madam Chair. It's important that we get this right, so it's worth the time to patiently go through the different perspectives on how we arrived here at these allocations percentages. And in terms of completing existing communities, that was very much a priority in our strategic plan. So how do we have a justification of, in some ways, contradicting what our strategic plan is in completing existing communities and the percentages of allocations that have been put forward today?
Councillor Leahy, as I believe Ms. Bégin did say, the existing communities that have already begun, some of them still have allocation in reserve and can use them. So the communities that have begun can still continue to be completed. There's further an inline storage solution that's been approved by this council that allows for other expanded allocation and room in the pipe for other existing communities to be continued, including in Sharon Village. So I think at this point we have two options that are before us, and what I would like to do is entertain comments regarding for one side or the other. It sounds to me like you're concerned about the motion that's on the table and you're speaking against it. You've made 4 points to that effect. I'm just wondering if anyone has anything further to bring forward.
I have
at
one
this
more
time.
question.
Okay, one more, thank you.
Thank you very much, through you, Madam Chair, for your indulgence of my questions. My question is, with regard to the developers who have units that remain unused, and we don't have a specific number from you of what those units are, do you know a specific number of what the unused remaining units are with developers?
Through you, Madam Chair, I'd have to go back and check the previous presentation, but I believe it's in the order of magnitude between 2,600 and 2,800 units.
And so how can we incentivize those developers? I understand from the report, we now have a clause which states that they have to use it or lose it within 2 years, basically, which is a great clause to incentivize people. But how do we incentivize developers who already have approval and yet continue to leave the units undeveloped?
Through you, Madam Chair, if I understand the question, you're referencing sort of the allocation that was provided to those that have draft approval. They were tied to front-ending agreements that predate my employment with the municipality, so I can't speak to why there was not a sunset clause incorporated, but those agreements do not have the same use it or lose it, if you will, clause that is attached to what we're proposing, and what I believe is the intention both regionally and provincially to attach to any allocation agreements going forward.
Councillor Johns.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I've read the resolution, the motions, and we actually have an existing allocation policy, and we have done this work. I feel like we've been talking about this for a long time, and I know that the staff have been working very hard on this for a long time. The challenge is that I don't think we're going to get to the right answer or the perfect answer. I think that the wording, how this has been written, is very broad to allow for application, quite frankly, as desired, because you could read that and you could say, is that a percentage at a given point in time? Is that a percentage as of the beginning of 2023? Is that a percentage with combined outstanding that are in use? Is that we got to move on. Like, we got to build. And there's a motion already been called, moved. We're not going to get it right, but we need to make a decision, and whether it is the right decision or it's the wrong decision, it is a decision, and I think the development community would appreciate us just making a decision. So, and I want to make a decision. I just want to, we need to move on. The staff need this. The development community needs this. Our residents need this, so we can get services built. We can get commercial and industrial built, so we can get school. We need this. We need to move on. It's been called. I would like to call the vote, and I would like to make a decision.
Okay. We have a motion on the floor, moved by Councillor Carruthers, that we receive the report and that the updated allocation policy be approved as amended to include updated priority criteria that generally prioritizes the assignment of available allocation as follows: employment-related uses 40%, new applications that diversify housing stock or contribute to attainability 50%, consents or individual connections 10%, and that council requests staff to employ a weighted criteria that reflects council priorities and supports consistency in evaluating requests and in making recommendations to council. All those in favor? And that motion carries unanimously. Thank you. The next item on our agenda is Development Services Report 2023-47, a zoning bylaw amendment and official plan amendment application for South Sharon Developments, Inc., which is also known as Menkes, and the address is 18326 Leslie Street. We have a motion that we receive, that we approve the official plan amendment, that we approve the zoning bylaw, that the implementing zoning official plan amendment be forwarded to the Region of York, and that the implementing zoning bylaw attached be brought forward to a future council. Did we want to have someone put that on the floor? Moved by Councillor Crone. Ms. Bégin, would you like to walk us through your report? I think this is an application that came to us in a prior term of council, so we might need a bit of familiarization.
That's correct, through you, Madam Chair. And this is relates to the deputation that members of committee heard earlier regarding the plans for the anchor tenant being a grocery store and then other commercial and office buildings located at Green Lane and Morel. I think the deputant did a good job of sort of summarizing the project, but I'm happy to answer any specific questions that members of council may have about, or members of committee may have about this particular application.
Okay. Members of committee, any questions? I had a couple. I know that we're not at the site plan point yet. I would like to see when we come to that site plan application that we would be looking at updating Morel, widening it and putting the sidewalks in so that folks from the northern part of the subdivision can actually safely walk there. We've got a lot of people who are walking on Morel now, and it terrifies me seeing people there, but because the road is so narrow. But I did want to ask Ms. Bégin, the report notes that we would not have setback and height restrictions under the site-specific zoning. Was there a rationale for that?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'll invite our manager of planning to speak in more detail to that, but I note that those are removing minimum requirements because they're actually seeking to have a larger setback, and because of the way the topography is and the fact that the buildings in question, it refers to the buildings that just align along Morel in terms of the fact that they're facing both Morel and essentially Green Lane. They have unique characteristics, but I'll let Ms. Moore speak more specifically to that.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Ms. Moore.
Hello. Through you, Madam Chair. So I believe the provisions that you're speaking to is the minimum first-story height. So they'll have the minimum first-story height of 4.5 meters shall not apply. That only applies to the first story of the building, and it is a minimum, not a maximum. It's really just an urban design rationale for why that's in the bylaw in the first place. And the second one is a maximum, sets a maximum exterior side yard setback of 5 meters. So, and that's really just because there are 2 exterior side yards for this site. So one of them is proposed to be reduced, and we'll have an exact idea of what those numbers are when we receive the site plan application.
Thank you. Any other, I personally feel like we need to make sure that we're creating more regulation. If we're making a site-specific zoning for this site, I would like to see a bit more information about what we're approving if it's site-specific, because it puts us in the driver's seat, particularly since the topography is so challenging in that area, and it's going to be adjacent to future residential. So we want to make sure that what they put in is going to be appealing to future residents as well. So that would be my feedback. Members of committee, anything further? Councillor Crothers, go ahead.
Thank you. I was happy when I saw this, thinking people being able to walk to get groceries or other amenities, and then I heard there's no sidewalks. So I'm wondering if we can speak a little bit more towards when those sidewalks go in, or why there isn't sidewalks there. I understand there's mailboxes too that people need to walk to. We have to be not forcing people into cars, but allowing people to walk. So I'm wondering who can address that.
Ms. Bégin?
Through you, Madam Chair, I can speak to the efforts that the proponent has made in terms of access to the grocery store specifically, and pathways and stairs to help manage the topography. As to sidewalks, I'll defer to my colleagues in engineering to be able to speak to that.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair.
Yep, go ahead.
Oh, through you, Madam Chair. I would suggest that those sidewalks would go in when those developments adjacent to those properties are approved and go in as well. So that would be associated with those additional properties.
If I may, I think that's not good enough. I think we could be waiting for a while if we don't have servicing to put in those adjacent properties, that if we're putting in something like this, and as part of our priority as a council, we're saying we want walkable communities, we have to put in those sidewalks to connect that community to this, this area.
Through you, Madam Chair, that's something we can look at. It's a little out of sequence to how things normally happen, but we could look to see how we might be able to make something work in there. We'd have to come back to you with that, though.
Thank you very much.
I think Morel got put in a little bit out of sequence as well. So, so I think we've got an unusual circumstance here. Councillor Johns, you looked like you had a question. Was I misreading you?
No, I'm just so, Madam Chair, thank you. I'm wondering, so are we needing to approve this today, or can we get some more time to better understand what can happen if we do approve? Can we get sidewalks in? What can we control on this site? Like, I mean, just looking for clarity from the newbie here.
I think, I mean, we're in the driver's seat. We can defer to December 5th. We can move this to CWC December 5th and allow for some time for members of committee to familiarize themselves a little bit more and speak to the applicant. Ms. Bégin, would that be possible?
Well, I would suggest to you, Madam Chair, that what we're considering is an OPA ZBA here, not I think these are more technical matters that we consider at the site plan stage. So I would suggest that it may be more appropriate for staff to follow up and to pursue these matters in conjunction with the site plan.
Go ahead.
Sure, and I think that is totally correct. I think if we could get some more time to get our head around and then be able to comment, because hearing this discussion here right now and knowing the neighborhood, this could be the single biggest impact for that neighborhood, maybe for 10 or 15 years, just by making sure that we are able to get a sidewalk in. And so I understand that is that site plan, but if we defer it and then speak to some other issues again, like people, it's awful what people are having to walk through. And if you picture people attempting even to use public transit, i.e. go to the GO station, they can't get there. And so this development is going to be very impactful for the residents of that neighborhood. And I think just a slight pumping of the brakes to make sure that we can get on the same page would be great.
Okay. Councillor Crone, this is your motion. Are you comfortable with withdrawing it? And
Absolutely.
okay, so motion is withdrawn. Do we want to have a deferral, a motion to defer? Okay. Councillor Johns has made a motion to defer to CWC December 5th. Is that it, Madam Clerk? For the next CWC?
Through you, Madam Chair, that is correct, and you would require ratification today to be able to accommodate that at council.
Please and thank you.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor. Any questions on that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that motion is carried. Thank you, committee. The next item on our agenda is Development Services Report 2023-48, a request for residential servicing allocation for Welland Land Development, 574 Green Lane East, with related files. We're looking for a motion to be put on the floor, please.
I will put the motion on to receive. I think we're doing a lot of withdrawing, so I think we should just start these reports with just a motion to receive, and if we want to go to the other ones after the report, I'm happy to look at that.
All right, Ms. Bégin, do you want to walk us through this?
Certainly, through you, Madam Chair. This is a specific allocation request, and I note that it may seem a little out of order considering we've just had the discussion around the draft allocation policy, but I would note a couple of things. One, that we do have an allocation policy in place, that the efforts to update the allocation policy were really to try to assist staff and council in prioritizing. And in keeping with those conversations, this request does prioritize diversifying the housing stock and through the creation of purpose-built rental and accessory dwelling units in the towns that are associated with the development. The rationale for the timing of bringing this forward is that it is, although it is its own project and its own application, it is tied to the relocation of the Howard House. And we, as council is aware, we note that there is some grant funding that was made available to the Sharon Temple, who would be the recipients of the Howard House. And there's some there's some urgency in terms of being able to complete works in order to be able to access that funding. So I appreciate members of committee's indulgence in reviewing this matter, even though it may feel a little bit early, but it is because of the ability to be able to support the Sharon Temple in their efforts.
Thank you. Members of committee, any questions? Councillor Johns.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I recognize we have some friends in the audience from Welland Group, and if it pleases you and pleases our staff, if we could also engage with them as well, if that is, do we need to move a motion to be able to do that?
Yeah, so we need a motion to waive procedural bylaw to that effect. Moved by Councillor Crone, that we waive procedural bylaw to recognize the representative from Welland Group here this evening, or this afternoon. We're still in the afternoon, but it feels like the evening because it's so dark in here. All those in favor? Opposed? And that motion carries.
Great, thanks, Madam Chair. One question as it relates to, I was, as I serve on the Sharon Temple, I'm the liaison for the Sharon Temple, and so at the last, the previous meeting, I asked the question, is there an agreement in place between the Sharon Temple and Welland Group that should this be approved, would that trigger the agreement? And I was surprised to find out that there wasn't an agreement in place that should we make a decision, it actually doesn't trigger anything. It's kind of like a handshake. And then when I was reading the motion, and my understanding, there is not a subject to contained within the motion that actually even directs that the Howard House be moved and completed, again, because there's no agreement. Like, what I am saying now is just made up, other than handshake agreement, completed up to $2.5 million, completed in working condition, completed in XYZ, and so, or Z. So my question is, and I would love to hear it on the mic, like, what is the commitment if it's not in paper, and it couldn't get done as of last night? We could all write it down here. Like, I'd like to hear something.
It's Mr. Wong, am I correct?
I'm sorry.
Your name, sir.
Thanks for the opportunity to speak, and good afternoon. I wasn't planning on speaking today, but happy to have that
Slightly
opportunity.
unusual, yes.
My name is Jack Wong. I am a principal at Malone Given Parsons, also the planning agent on behalf of Welland Development, Inc. Through you, Madam Chair, and thanks for the question, Councillor Johns. To your question, there is an agreement in place. That agreement has started actually on the day one of this whole Howard House relocation project. What the intent is that, once all the details and the provisions and clauses and then all the responsibility, both technically and then legally and financially, being agreed upon by the both parties, the intent is to obviously execute that as a legal paperwork that solidify the relocation project. I guess to your question, the motion or the recommendation currently before you doesn't speak to that specifically. I did ask that question to my client, Welland Development. Should the allocation request be granted by council today, there is an intent and a commitment from Welland to execute that agreement to allow the advancement of the Howard House relocation project. So hopefully that gives you the answer that you're looking for. There is definitely a strong will and commitment between the both parties to make sure this relocation project can be moved forward.
Madam Chair, if I could follow up. So
ahead,
strong will, commitment, next is prayer. Like, I always like, even when it's spelled out on paper, and I'm, after these 4 years, I'm sorry that there hasn't been a document that was able to trigger this, and so I see Ms. Bengin putting her hand up.
Sorry, I'm in the middle of scribbling a potential resolution, that's why. Ms. Bengin, please go ahead.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. And absolutely, Council may feel it's appropriate to include a subject to clause to this. Just wanted to provide some context in terms of the rationale for why it was presented this way. And in keeping with the considerations around the allocation policy, wanted to consider this on the merits of the application. And certainly, the Howard House is one of many community benefits associated with this, but we believe that the application, because the merits stand for themselves, it was more so the timing of bringing this forward that was related to the Howard House, but absolutely could be appropriate to include the subject to clause.
Councillor
I just wanted to
Johns
say
and then
that.
Councillor Carruthers. Yeah.
Thank you, and thank you. Hopefully, you don't take my comments as off-putting. I was just trying to prove a point that it would have been great to get to that point. So thank you. Thank you,
I
Madam Chair.
probably would have said the same thing, Councillor Johns. Councillor Carruthers, go ahead, please.
Thank you. I'm having trouble supporting this. We spent, a better part of a year looking at our allocation policy, and this would, in one fell swoop, use up 10% of that, or 20% of what's dedicated to diversity of housing. And given that we've just passed our allocation policy, I would like to look at it in more detail. What does that 50%, 530 units, what does that look like? Where do we want them? Where's the best place for them? And the checklist that we had seen before, how does this compare to that? There was nowhere in our allocation policy that we spoke about, so much. 10% of it will go to moving a heritage house. That's not part of this. So I just think that we're moving too quickly on this given that we had just passed our allocation policy. And I would like time to look at what our options are before we give this away. Once we give it away, we can't get it back. And I think it's prudent on us to look at what our options are.
Ms. Bégin, this is exactly why you presented it to us this way, was that it was not supposed to be 109 units in exchange for moving a house, but it was 109 units in exchange for building 134 purpose-built apartments and 9 townhouses that would have accessory dwelling units in it.
And that's correct, through you, Madam Chair. And I think this is also symptomatic of the issue where we're trying, the efforts to update the allocation policy were, in some sense, an effort to turn on the tap and be able to say yes to some of these things. And this is a proposal that aligns with our, the stated objectives around diversifying the housing stock, creating purpose-built rental, which is something that this community desperately needs. The proponents were amenable to sort of adapting the proposal based on council's feedback over a number of months. And I think that there's been, I think that it's a little it may be somewhat counterproductive to if we have a direction and we have identified priorities to then sort of pull back to where we were before establishing those priorities.
Councillor Johns. Oh, yes, to respond, yes, and then Councillor Johns after that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think you convinced me. Thank you. I had to say that.
Should we put a little red mark on the timeline for today?
And the date. We're marking the calendar here.
I have Councillor Johns and then Councillor Leahy.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and thank you, Councillor Carruthers. I'm actually now, so now I'll take the Sharon Temple hat off for a second and just speak to, which we should be doing, is speaking to the merits of the development themselves, like the opportunity on the housing. And not only does this deliver on housing, as I've been championing for the past year, these folks are going to lead on commercial. And what this does is that delivering it doesn't just deliver housing. They're intending to deliver housing to support commercial, and that's why they want the housing, to make sure that a business can flourish within East Gwillimbury. And so I am in full support of this project. I was just a little bit, Sharon Temple hat back on, I was disappointed that there wasn't a formal trigger within the agreement to complete the whole awesome package that is Welland in the development of commercial, residential, and this full commitment to community. So, but I think that we can possibly get there, hopefully with a bit of a further discussion of what could happen here.
Okay,
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Leahy, go ahead, please.
Thank you very much. Through you, Madam Chair. I have significant reservations, and because of the future financial implications for the taxpayers of the town of East Gwillimbury. And although you have removed the wording of Sharon Temple from this motion, the two are linked. Unfortunately, they are linked. They were linked before I joined council. So council has now been put in the position of deciding upon sewage allocations in an accelerated manner with Welland Development based on this deal between the developer and the Sharon Temple, which again, just to remind everybody, the town of East Gwillimbury does not own or control the Sharon Temple. And we are in the midst of budget deliberations. We have passed in principle, approved in principle, an increase in the budgeting that we give as a town to the operational costs of the Sharon Temple. And so this has been accelerated. The 109 precious single detached equivalent units of sewage allocation has been accelerated because of the urgency that the Sharon Temple feels it needs to move forward with. And I want everyone to understand on the record the future implications of moving the Howard House while it's being done at your expense, that if they are currently asking us for increases in operational costs, that I can only imagine in the future that the operational costs will increase with the addition of the Howard House, which will lead to further asks in the future of our budget, of our taxpayer dollars, for operating the Sharon Temple, which we do not own. I feel that is an important point to make.
Thank you. Anything further? Councillor Crone.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would admit that this was a challenging proposal that was put before us. I would have preferred that there not be those linkages to the temple, and that we could try and operate in isolation. So when I was looking at this, I actually separated the impact on the temple and looked at this proposal on its own merits. And as Councillor Johns said quite correctly, that this ticks a lot of boxes for us. I have just about every developer that has land along Green Lane, I have asked, begged, pleaded for condominium units, for purpose-built rentals, and you've delivered. And so to be consistent, I think I need to be supportive of that. But I'd also like to recognize that the Howard House, has, throughout all of this, has remained intact. I think there are some other developers out there that maybe this house wouldn't have survived as long. It could have mysteriously burnt down or been knocked down, and these things happen from time to time. And the fine that we'd give you would be substantially less than what it's going to cost you to move it. So, anyway, not that I've given you any ideas. Anyway, I'm trying to say I appreciate that you're being good, upstanding citizens. Anyway, so Madam Chair, I will be supporting this. Okay. On its own merits, the fact that the temple gets to access some more grant funding, that's a bonus. Thank you.
So at this point, we have a motion to simply receive, and so I'm wondering where you would like to go with this, committee. Councillor Carruthers, you said that you had been convinced.
Yes.
So you want to add the rest of the resolutions in?
I'm happy to add the rest of it. And I want just to say the reason I'm convinced is not because of the Howard House. Mm-hmm. And that was actually what had a bit of a blinder for me, because I do have a lot of concerns about and the cost of it. And when we're talking about affordability and housing, yet this money, even though it's not town money, we have millions of dollars going towards moving a house that no one will ever live in. So that was really blinding me to the fact that, as Ms. Bejan said, this does tick all the boxes. This is what we're asking for. It does feel a little fast, hot on the heels of just doing the allocation policy, but the whole reason we're doing the allocation policy is because we want to get these things done. These people have been waiting. There's other ones like them, I'm sure. So that's what convinced me. So I am voting in favor of this despite the Howard House, not because of the Howard House. But I am happy to move the recommendations that we allocate 109 single detached equivalent units as outlined here, and that council may rescind the assignment of servicing allocation if it's not done within 2 years.
Thank you, Councillor Carruthers. Any discussion on the motion? Councillor Leahy?
I'd just like to make one final comment, and that is I would like to seek acknowledgement from our treasurer, if possible, that considering the pattern of the past contributions from the town to the Sharon Temple of exceeding hundreds of thousands of dollars over the past decade, as well as the most recent deliberations, which we passed in principle an increase in the operation costs that we give to them, as well as hundreds of thousands of dollars in in-kind services, if that is correct. And if, according to that pattern, if it would be a probability to anticipate that there would be a future increase in terms of the financial negative impact of approving this allocation with the moving of the Howard House.
Councillor Johns, we just need a microphone on. Thank you.
Sincerely, respectfully, I will call a point of order on this. That is, like, the question does not relate to what we are specifically discussing.
Okay. So what we'll do is, if we have any further comments on the resolution before us, I will call a vote, and then we can try and address Councillor Leahy's concern following that, because we've been very deliberate in wanting to separate the two issues.
Thank you, and with respect. And last comment, I'm calling for a recorded vote.
Okay. We can't do a recorded vote in committee, so when it comes to us at council, you can ask for a recorded vote.
Through you, Madam Chair, that's correct. Per the procedure bylaw, there are no recorded votes in the committee of the whole.
Okay. So we have a motion on the floor from Councillor Carruthers as presented. All those in favor? Opposed? And that motion is carried. Thank you, Mr. Wong. Sorry for putting you on the spot. Okay, so we've addressed that one. Councillor Leahy, you had a question for the treasurer regarding, it was a bit long-winded. I'm not sure what you were, if you could reword your question, please, to let him assist. Please.
Through you, Madam Chair. It's really simple. I'll keep it short. So what is preventing negative future financial impact on the taxpayers of a increased request for operational costs once the Howard House is moved to the location of the Sharon Temple property?
You want to take a stab at that, Mr. Treasurer?
Sure, through you, Madam Chair. I can't predict whether the Temple will come back and ask us for additional funding. They did present at our budget committee last week, and I think that question was asked, and I think Ms. Woodyatt indicated that they had a plan to cover their operating costs associated with moving the Howard House and operating it, and it didn't indicate that they were going to be looking to the town for providing additional funding. So that's the best I can do at this point. I can't predict.
Thank you, Mr. Marshall. Okay. The next item on our agenda is from Development Services Report 2023-49, Animal Shelter Services, a Memorandum of Understanding. May I have a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Carruthers. Ms. Bégin, would you like to walk us through this one? I know that we have our Manager of Bylaw Services in the room as well, in case we have questions.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And I'll invite our Manager of Bylaws to speak to this if you have any questions, but essentially our manager has been working to negotiate an updated memorandum of understanding that involves the towns of Georgina, Aurora, and Newmarket to provide animal shelter services collaboratively, and this this memorandum is looking at providing those services over the next 5-year term. It did have a budget impact in terms of what was originally projected for the 2024 budget, and there was a slight increase. But I think that the efficiencies that we've realized through this joint approach to providing the shelter services are, are defensible, and we've recognized sort of the cost impacts that we expect to be able to factor in the subsequent years, and certainly we'll, as we monitor this, if we notice that we are trending to be outside of what we're projecting, we would come back to council and advise that there's a significant change in the operational costs. But we believe that this is a model that has been working well and will continue to serve the town.
Thank you. Members of committee, any questions? Seeing none, I have a motion from Councillor Carruthers as presented. All those in favor? And that motion is carried. And you didn't have to get put on the hot seat. Thank you. Don't go too far because we have another one. Next one is a report, DS 2023-50, noise bylaw amendment regarding delegated authority. This was something that council had asked for. May I have a mover, please? Councillor Foster. Ms. Bégin, do you want to just give us a quick intro?
Certainly, through you, Madam Chair. Essentially, this, as you noted, was in response to a request from council that because of the volume of requests that we get, that they be delegated to staff, noting that sort of the for the normal one-off type events or celebrations, that it's appropriate that staff could make the decision and then notify the ward councillors. And then certainly for anything more significant, such as a multi-day festival or something that was going to cause disturbance over time, we would bring that back for council's consideration.
Okay, thank you. Members of committee, we have a motion from Councillor Foster. Any questions on this one? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? And that motion carries. And I believe that brings us, am I correct? Does that bring us to the end of our prepared agenda and development services? Ms. Bégin, do you have anything further to bring up at this time?
Through you, Madam Chair, nothing further. There was something I was going to mention and I can't recall, so apologies.
You know where to find us.
Yes, thank you.
Members of committee, anything further to raise under this area? Seeing nothing, I'll turn the chair back to you, Councillor Crone.
Thank you very much. We are now at item J, Community Parks, Recreation and Culture, with myself in the chair. We have a report from on facility lease agreements. Mr. Carmison, could you briefly walk us through this and provide us some detail? Thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. The report prepared for council recommends 2 lease renewals. These renewals are the result of unsolicited proposals to the town. Staff confirm there are no competing interests as per our allocation policy for the space and the time occupied by these lease agreements. In addition, the town will be adding additional program and permit space with the Health and Active Living Plaza, further reducing the potential for any competing interests for this for the space occupied by these leases. The lease term indicated in the terms of reference in the report is a 5-year duration. Town staff will build in a standard termination clause into the lease in addition to the terms of reference provided in the report. Happy to answer any questions related to the report.
Thank you very much, Mr. Carmison. Could I have a mover for this, first of all? Someone? Councillor Johns, thank you. Are there any questions? Councillor Carruthers.
Thank you. I've had concerns raised from the community about the use of the digital sign in front of the community center for permit holders. We have, especially without our local print newspaper, we need to make sure that that sign is dedicated to town messaging. And I'm just wondering if there's anything in the lease that says they're allowed to use that sign. And if there is, I think that's something that we shouldn't be doing. So can I just have a comment on that, please?
Mr. Carmison?
Through you, Mr. Chair, there is nothing specific with regards to advertising in the lease, and we can default and refer to our standard communications protocol with regards to signage and posting of any community-based activities, and limit our postings to those activities.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Councillor Roy DiClemente, you have a question.
I have a history lesson and then a question. The reason why the church is using our electronic signs is they used to have a sandwich board that they would put out when they had their services. And so we asked them to stop doing that. So in exchange, they got onto our sign. So that's how it happened. It doesn't have to happen. It doesn't have to continue any further, but that's why that happened in the first place. The question I had was with respect to the facility. I know we've talked about a long-term plan for renovating the facility, and I'm just wondering if that would conflict with any sort of lease agreement since it's a 5-year term. Are we looking at the community center within that time frame?
Mr. Carmison?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we would look at, as a first phase, a concept design. However, there would be no construction activity within the duration of this proposed lease.
Thank you. And then further, if I may, Mr. Chair, I'm just wondering if we've had, I guess my question would relate to sort of the exclusivity of these arrangements. Have we had requests to permit those spaces? Have we had demand, or are we still kind of operating with the fact that there isn't a huge demand for these facilities at that time? And so we're within our rights to lock them up with a long-term permit holder.
Mr. Carmison?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to my knowledge, I can confirm that we have not had competing interests both for the space or for the time block that is being proposed to council.
So it's time this is great revenue for us because no one's asking for it. But if should a time come, we still have an exit clause in our lease, correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's correct.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? Seeing none, I will call vote that we receive and authorize the general manager to enter into these agreements. All those in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. And that brings us to the end of item 1. Mr. Carmison, do you have any other items you'd like to share with committee?
Through you, Mr. Chair, nothing further at this time. Thank you.
Does committee have anything else for Mr. Carmison? Okay, seeing none, we will carry on. And I believe that brings us to the end of our agenda, unless there's any other business from committee. Seeing none, can I have a motion for adjournment? Moved by Councillor Leahy. Be it resolved that this meeting of Committee of the Whole adjourn at 5:06 p.m. All in favor? Carried. We'll see you back at 6 o'clock.